Chapter 2060. Being surrounded by 5 undying God of creation stage beings. This was indeed quite a frightening thought. However, Unlin wasn't going to be intimidated easily. These monsters were indeed very powerful, but they were only the weakest God of creation stage beings, and they were even weaker than Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo. There was no such thing as absolute invincibility. If there was, then it was because you hadn't discovered your enemy's weakness. Unlin quickly analyzed the situation before him. When he had just killed the metal heavenly wolf, a vast and boundless power had surged from the earth, which had reforged the metal heavenly wolf's body and revived it. It could be said that these monsters had obtained their undying nature through the earth. Seeing as that was the case, as long as he cut off the connection between the monsters and the earth, then completely killed them, would he be able to completely kill these monsters? The earth was a part of this world, and it would be extremely difficult for anyone else to accomplish this. However, Unlin was different. Unlin had a spell technique that just so happened to be able to deal with this situation. A streak of silver light suddenly swept toward him. The metal heavenly wolf pounced toward Unlin with no fear of death again. The giant rock crocodile and the liquid octopus also charged toward Unlin, forming a 3-pronged attack. Unlin's right arm swelled again, and crimson energy accumulated in a frenzy in his arm. The energy quickly accumulated to the point where even his 5-elemental body was almost unable to withstand it. The metal heavenly wolf smiled with disdain and mockery, as if to say, "I have an undying body, so what if I take another punch from you?" The giant rock crocodile's entire body was inky black, and it was over 100,000 feet in length. It was like a moving mountain range, and it also crashed toward Unlin with a sinister smile, completely ignoring the attacks that Unlin had prepared. They were the eternal guardians of the earth, and no one in this world could kill them. At this time, countless black divine runes suddenly appeared on top of Unlin's head, and a gray circle of light rapidly spun in his left palm. Then, it instantly spread out to a radius of 100 miles, enveloping the metal direwolf, giant rock crocodile, and liquid octopus that were pouncing towards him. Even the ghost vine treant and lava giant that were fighting with the divine soul Unlin were also enveloped. The metal Sirius realized that its surroundings had become a colorless gray. Even it itself had become a monotonous gray. It was as if the entire world was this color. What was worse was that it could no longer feel the real world. It was as if the entire space had been separated. The only thing that was different was Unlin. Unlin was the only existence in the entire world that had color. The 5 elements ring shone brilliantly. His right arm was swollen crimson, and his eyes were as unfathomable as 2 deep pools. How could this be? The giant rock crocodile that was charging towards Unlin was also shocked. However, its body, which was as heavy as a divine mountain, was already wrapped in endless kinetic energy. It was impossible for it to stop. It could only continue to collide with the figure in white. Unlin's figure moved. In the next instant, he had flashed more than 10 miles away, successfully avoiding the giant rock crocodile's attack. He arrived at the giant rock crocodile's back, and then smashed his fist down angrily. Fist of the heavenly Tao, 6 times, 5 elements Qilin arm. Boom! The golden light, accompanied by the power of the 5 elements, exploded on the giant rock crocodile's back, directly shattering its hard carapace, and then tearing its body apart. The giant rock crocodile screamed, but its body was still hammered into 2 halves from the middle by Unlin. The violent energy even shattered its life functions. The metal Sirius, which was about to flank Unlin from behind, trembled all over and stopped its attack. It was horrified to find that the giant rock crocodile was dead, and it was the kind of death where its life force completely dissipated. It didn't even have a chance to revive. How could this be? Why didn't the earth save its life? The metal Sirius suddenly had a bad feeling. There was definitely something wrong with the gray world in front of it. Unlin had already turned to look at the metal Sirius, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. "Aren't you not afraid of death? Come here." The metal Sirius felt an inexplicable chill in its heart. It didn't dare to be as arrogant as before. It silently took a few steps back and looked at the gray space around it with vigilance, looking for a way to break out of this situation. This gray space was the strange space created by Enlin's sky sealing technique. Enlin had modified the sky sealing technique. By fusing the sky sealing technique with the sky breaking technique, he created a more independent and sturdy space. This space was completely separated from the original world. There was no sky, no earth, and everything was gray. Only Enlin was real, and he was the strongest. This was the gray world ruled by Enlin. The eternal guardians of the earth weren't truly immortal. When they were about to die, the earth would suddenly help them recover. The earth was their medical kit. In that case, he would use the sky sealing technique to isolate the connection between the earth and the eternal guardian of the earth. If he killed the eternal guardian of the earth now, without the protection of the earth, the eternal guardian would truly die. The earth could revive a monster that was facing death, but it couldn't revive a monster that was already dead. Die! Enlin pounced at the metal Sirius. Roar! The metal Sirius knew that there was no way out, so it also stretched out its sharp claws and slashed at Enlin. However, its expression was no longer as calm as before. Instead, it was filled with panic. The eternal guardian was no longer eternal. What right did it have to be arrogant? Chi. A series of tentacles imbued with all types of energy also swept toward Enlin at this moment. The low-profile liquid octopus finally sprang into action. Its body was constructed from all types of strange liquids, and it was capable of unleashing all kinds of dazzling technique. However, these techniques were nothing more than flashy tricks to Enlin, and they posed no threat to him whatsoever. Enlin unleashed his seventh-layered armor of the heavenly gods, and the liquid octopus was unable to break through his defenses in a short time. As such, Enlin could only crush the heavenly metal wolf with ease. Fist of the heavenly Tao 6 times. 5 elements Qilin arm. Roar! The metal Sirius drew a silver-white light in the air and landed heavily on Enlin's armor. There was an extremely sharp screech, but it only left a few scratches. Then, its head was smashed by Enlin's fist again. The headless body fell to the ground and lay motionless. At this moment, the consciousness Enlin also took advantage of this opportunity to reduce the ghost vine monster to a pulp. Hee, it's your turn now. Enlin turned to the liquid octopus behind him. The liquid octopus's floating tentacles were all trembling uncontrollably. This man was way too terrifying. He could destroy an eternal guardian with a single punch? Just what kind of being was the heavenly earth god trying to make them deal with? Whoosh! Enlin's body flashed as he pounced toward the liquid octopus. The liquid octopus swung its countless tentacles toward Enlin, each of which was powerful enough to shatter mountains and shatter the earth. However, all of its tentacles could only make Enlin shudder slightly. It was unable to inflict any substantial damage to him. This level of power had completely exceeded its imagination. Fist of the heavenly Tao, 6-fold 5-elemental Kirin arm. Enlin unleashed the exact same technique with a sinister smile on his face. However, right at this moment, his heaven-sealing technique was suddenly torn apart by an extremely fearsome power. A greenish-yellow figure shot forth from the crack with a ball of unknown white substance in its hand. Enlin, have a taste of the gift I've prepared for you. Chapter 2061. The heavenly earth god suddenly tore through the heaven-sealing technique and flew toward Enlin. He wasn't hoping that the eternal guardian of the earth would be able to kill Enlin. All he wanted was for him to have enough time to prepare this spell technique. Enlin's fist was about to land on the liquid octopus, but it immediately changed directions and flew toward the heavenly earth god. A white substance revolved around the heavenly earth god's hand. The substance was pure white, and there were specks of starry light shimmering within it. At the same time, it was transforming into different forms at an extremely fast rate, sometimes as hard as rock, sometimes as sharp as steel, and sometimes as soft as glue. Lin felt as if he had seen the amalgamation of countless different substances. Even though its power wasn't all that astonishing, it was extremely mighty and boundless, striking the onlooker with a sense of insignificance and inferiority. Fist of the Heavenly Tao, sixfold five-elemental Kiran arm. Soul essence substance. The heavenly earth god extended a palm, upon which was none other than the white substance. Lin's fist crashed into the heavenly earth god's palm, and his fist, which was powerful enough to kill an eternal guardian of the earth with a single punch, exploded upon contact with the heavenly earth god's palm, instantly pulverizing the gray heaven sealing technique. However, what was even more astonishing to Lin was that his fist was unable to break through the white substance before him, as if the power he unleashed was on a completely different level. The white substance in the heavenly earth god's palm suddenly became as soft as a sponge, and it absorbed all of the power of Lin's fist. Even the power of the five elements and the heaven-crushing technique were completely nullified by the purest power of the earth. There was a sense of emptiness, as if he couldn't strike anything. In the next instant, the white substance suddenly became as sharp as a blade before slicing through Lin's fist. This was clearly the skin of his phenomenal success stage body of the war god, but it was sliced through like a fruit, shredding countless pieces of flesh and bones in its wake. Lin was struck by an indescribable sense of excruciating pain, and his expression shifted drastically as he hurtled back in retreat. However, the heavenly earth god had anticipated this, and he was advancing much faster than Lin was retreating. His palm was imbued with a peculiar white substance, and Lin's entire arm had been obliterated in the blink of an eye. Lin's heart jolted with shock as he stared at the white substance in the heavenly earth god's palm with extreme wariness. This substance was far too terrifying. His power was unable to strike the white substance as he was unable to reach it. However, the white substance was able to strike him in all directions. Could it be something of a higher level than the essential power of a god of creation? No, that's impossible. If the heavenly earth god really was this powerful, then the other gods of creation wouldn't be able to resist. Are you confused about this? The heavenly earth god chased after the crippled Lin with a cruel smile on his face. The essence of the earth is the representation of all material forms. The Tai Chu continent is material, the billions of stars are material, and the energy in the nebula is also material. There are trillions of materials in this world, and I have created this brand new material. It is a unique material in the entire universe, and it can manifest boundless possibilities at will. It can also change its nature in response to external stimuli and unleash the most extreme repressive reactions. The heavenly earth god looked at the white substance in his palm with admiration and infatuation in his eyes. He was clearly very pleased with what he had created. Lin's heart was filled with astonishment upon hearing this. He had created a new material? Was the heavenly earth god really that bad *SS? He could create things on his own, and he had created a brand new material that had never existed before in the universe. Perhaps even a true god wouldn't be able to do this. This was unique in the entire universe. For some reason, he thought of the power of the Holy Birth. Due to the fact that he was one and eternal, the power of the Holy Birth possessed a very special transcendental power. However, that power couldn't render him completely powerless. Could it be that his power had been targeted? Lin suddenly realized that his power hadn't been engulfed. Instead, it had been nullified by a strange power, which was why he had been completely defeated. Could it be that it had instantly transformed into an extremely powerful material that could counter his power? In a sense, this was indeed an invincible being. At this moment, the heavenly earth god launched another attack. Thump! The heavenly earth god suddenly contracted. Immediately afterward, Lin was struck by an extremely terrifying suction force, which made his escape abruptly falter. This suction force was even more powerful than the 1 billion-fold gravitational force of the Earth's slaughter formation. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The heavenly Earth god transformed into a series of extremely agile white ropes that swept toward Unlin. Unlin's heart jolted once again. This thing could unleash consecutive attacks. However, he wasn't going to resign himself to death. He had already devised a plan of action. In this dire situation, Unlin's eyes took on a clear golden color. At the same time, a peculiar ripple began to proliferate throughout heaven and earth. In that instant, everything within a radius of over a kilometer, regardless of whether it was the heavenly Earth God, the heavenly Earth God, or the heavenly Earth God, everything fell into a state of absolute stillness. Time had stopped. Unlin stabbed his evil-slaying sword viciously toward the heavenly Earth God's palm. Time could only be stopped for 1 second. Unlin wasn't confident that he could kill the heavenly Earth God in 1 second, but he could destroy the heavenly Earth God's meticulously prepared trump card in 1 second. The heavenly Earth God had released the Eternal Guardian to buy him some time, so it was clear that the heavenly Earth God couldn't create this heavenly Earth God just like that. As such, destroying the heavenly Earth God's first priority was to destroy it. Destroy! Unlin brought his evil-slaying sword down viciously. The heavenly Earth God could instantly change its power according to the situation in the outside world, thereby creating an absolute suppression. However, in a situation where time was still, the solitary substance could not change its attribute at all, nor could it make the best resistance to the outside world. Yes, it was invincible, but its ability to stop time was its only weakness. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, annihilate. As soon as Unlin made his move, he did not hold back at all. He used a sword move that could annihilate the target into nothingness, not giving Duyuan substance any chance to catch its breath or revive. Black light flashed, and the solitary substance was rapidly dissipating and annihilating at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, the Duyuan substance was completely annihilated. The time of stillness was extremely short. A second later, time was stopped, and the heavenly Earth God was able to move again. He chuckled coldly as he swatted the solitary substance toward Unlin. Die! Puff! His palm landed on Unlin's sturdy chest. The air suddenly became quiet. The heavenly Earth God's smile froze on his face. Where's the unique substance I created? At this moment, Unlin had already pointed a finger toward the heavenly Earth God's head. Finger of the Heavenly Tao. Chapter 2062. A golden pillar of light pierced through the heavens. The heavenly Earth God hurtled back in retreat with a faint gash on his forehead. He instantly realized what had happened, and he stared at the white-robed man with astonishment on his face. The power of time. Who would have thought that you would be able to grasp this opening? In the distance, the heavenly sea god and the heavenly Een god were also astonished. Not only had the eternal guardian of the Earth God been slain, but even the heavenly Earth God's unique substance had been destroyed? He had been wounded by Unlin again? The heavenly Een God was completely unable to imagine that the invincible heavenly Earth God would be defeated by Unlin over and over again. The heavenly sea god was also very surprised. In his divinations, Unlin's current combat prowess was nowhere near enough to withstand the heavenly Earth God's trump card, but who would have thought that he would be able to break through it so quickly? This made things even more interesting. The heavenly Earth God's expression had already become extremely dark. He had initially planned to use his unique substance to force Unlin into a corner, but never would he have thought that Unlin would have a way to break through this predicament. What was he supposed to do now? Liquid octopus, stop Unlin! The heavenly Earth God commanded in a calm voice. The liquid octopus immediately pounced toward Unlin upon hearing this, and it extended its tentacles toward the white-robed man like a series of monstrous demonic claws. Unlin didn't use his heaven-sealing technique. He possessed an immortal body, so he wasn't afraid of Enlin no matter how powerful he was. "You're trying to buy time through these guardians again?" A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face as he opened his hand, upon which a gray halo of light appeared over his palm. The halo of light expanded once again before the liquid octopus' horrified eyes, turning everything between heaven and earth into a gray color. Heaven's sealing technique. You can still use your heaven sealing technique? The liquid octopus was astonished. "Who told you I can only use my heaven sealing technique once?" Enlin chuckled. The heavenly earth god was using the guardians to buy time, so he naturally didn't have time to interrupt Enlin's heaven sealing technique. As such, Enlin was going to use the heaven sealing technique to kill all of the heavenly earth god's underlings first. The liquid octopus was in despair. If the heavenly earth god had told it to stall for time, it would have happily unleashed all of its divine abilities to stall Enlin. However, Enlin had used the heaven sealing technique. Now that he was in charge of stalling for time, the experience was completely different. He was basically throwing his life away. Bang bang bang! The liquid octopus madly slapped Enlin with its tentacles, but Enlin still chose to take it head-on and blocked all of its attacks with his 7-layered authority armor. He clenched his fist and punched the liquid octopus in front of him. Fist of the Heavenly Tao, 6 times 5 elements Qilin arm. It was a familiar scene with the exact same move. The liquid octopus experienced the same despair as the giant rock crocodile and the metal Sirius. The fist smashed through the tentacles in front of it like it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Then, it landed on its head, denting its head. Then, it shook in all directions. The terrifying energy exploded and tore its head into pieces. Its tentacles fell to the ground along with chunks of flesh and blood. The extremely powerful liquid octopus didn't even get a chance to display its might before it was completely destroyed. Enlin's physical body didn't rest. Instead, he immediately went to help Enlin's consciousness take on the lava giant. The lava giant's defenses were simply too powerful, and Enlin's consciousness was unable to insta-kill it. Enlin's physical body arrived before the lava giant, and he unleashed his fist of the heavenly Tao and 5 elemental Kirin arms before insta-killing the lava giant with a single punch. This was the exact same technique that Enlin's physical body had never failed him. The heavenly sea god and the heavenly yin-yang god were both a little dazed. Enlin was the epitome of what it meant to be an invincible human war god. Even against the eternal guardian summoned by the heavenly earth god, he was still able to crush it like a child. Whoosh! Enlin voluntarily broke free of his heaven sealing technique. The heavenly earth god's lips twitched at the sight of Enlin's triumphant return. The liquid octopus and the lava giant had bought him far less time than he had anticipated. Even they couldn't take a single punch from Enlin? "Oh? You're still trying to use soul substance?" Enlin could see a milky white substance materializing between the heavenly earth god's palms. He was very familiar with this substance. It was none other than soul substance. Who would have thought that the heavenly earth god would use this attack again after Enlin had already nullified it once? Was he unwilling to accept this? Did he have to use soul substance to prove himself? No, it was actually because soul substance really was very bad *SS. Enlin was well aware of this. Most importantly, he couldn't use his time-stop technique in quick succession. If the heavenly earth god was able to produce another unique substance, he would be in an extremely difficult situation to deal with. Perhaps the heavenly earth god had figured this out, which was why he was so insistent on using soul substance. Without any hesitation, Enlin slashed his evil-slaying sword toward the milky white substance in the heavenly earth god's palms. A black light flashed through the air. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, annihilation. Bam! A peculiar power of annihilation exploded upon the milky white substance in the heavenly earth god's palms, and invisible ripples blossomed like lotus flowers. However, the milky white substance instantly formed countless intertwining bodies, as if it was from one dimension to multiple dimensions. Layers upon layers of intertwining and unfolding into a protective barrier. When the annihilation exploded, it trembled violently, and cracks even appeared, but in the end it blocked the power of annihilation. It was blocked? Unlin's expression shifted. This was the first time his annihilation technique had been blocked. You're still too late. A smile appeared on the heavenly earth god's face as he made his way toward Enlin with the milky white substance in his hands. Keep using time stop. After all, this is the only flaw with soul substance. What? You can't use it anymore? The heavenly earth god instantly teleported to Enlin, and the soul substance in his hands erupted. If you can't use it, then please die. Enlin appeared behind the heavenly earth god before slashing his golden soul blade toward his neck. However, before the soul blade could completely fall, his chest was punctured by a white substance that resembled a spear. At the same time, countless white swords stabbed toward Enlin's physical body. Wind sword. Enlin slashed his evil-slaying sword toward the white swords at an extremely fast speed. However, just as the black sword blade was about to come into contact with the surface of the white swords suddenly transformed into soft, snake-like objects that slithered along the blade of the sword before quickly crawling toward Enlin. Just as Enlin's sword strike was about to recede, the snake-like objects suddenly transformed into terrifying flying swords that stabbed viciously toward Enlin. Enlin also had the top-tier defensive abilities of his 7 heavenly god armors, but these unique elements were imbued with the paramount power of the heavenly gods of the earth, and in the instant that they came into contact with Enlin's powers of the heavenly gods, they were able to completely suppress Enlin's powers of the heavenly gods before breaking through them. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A series of holes appeared on the armor of the heavenly gods. A dozen or so white swords pierced through Enlin's armor with unstoppable force before stabbing viciously into Enlin's body. Blood instantly splattered through the air, staining his white robe red. Chapter 2063. No matter what you did, it would be able to respond in its optimal form. No matter what type of power you used, it would be able to counter it with the most restraining power. There was nowhere to hide. It was unstoppable. This was the terror of the Duyuan substance. In just one round, Enlin was pierced through by a dozen thin swords made of unique matter. The heavenly sea god's eyes narrowed slightly as he nodded lightly upon seeing this. Even though there were some twists and turns, things were finally back on track. The next step was for the heavenly earth god to use his trump card to force Enlin into a corner, where Enlin was on the brink of death, and forced Enlin to transform into the true heavenly darkness god. Only when Enlin transformed into the true heavenly darkness god would he be able to contend against the heavenly earth god. Only then would the heavenly sea god be able to find an opportunity to complete its plan. Enlin had already turned toward the heavenly sea god. He was clearly extremely frustrated and wanted to seek help. The heavenly sea god acted as if he didn't see this and only snuck a glance of encouragement toward Enlin. Motherf ****. Enlin cursed in his heart. He felt like he had been scammed by the heavenly sea god. The heavenly sea god hadn't lied to him about the location of the Earth Slaughter Formation and its fatal flaws. The heavenly sea god had not lied to him about the fact that the heavenly earth god would be injured by the backlash from the destruction of the earth-killing formation. However, wasn't the heavenly earth god supposed to be on par with his current combat prowess after being struck by the backlash? Enlin looked at the dozens of thin swords that had pierced through his body, and 10,000 beasts stampeded wildly in his heart. How could this be called a 50-50 chance? He knew very well that the heavenly sea god only had 7 heavenly gods, the 5 elemental body, the consciousness of Enlin, and the dark immortal transformation at most. However, the dark immortal transformation would be useless as soon as it was unleashed, so he could only unleash this much power. But why did the heavenly sea god send him to battle the heavenly earth god in his current state? What was he plotting? Wasn't this pushing him into a pit of fire? Enlin knew very well that his death would not benefit the heavenly sea god in any way. Hence, it was quite obvious why the heavenly sea god was doing this. The heavenly sea god was definitely aware that Enlin possessed a life-immolating technique. He wanted Enlin to sacrifice his life to battle the heavenly earth god. Perhaps this was the only way to truly have a 50-50 chance. At this time, the solitary substance had already invaded Enlin's body. It targeted Enlin's body and changed its attributes, carrying out a destructive attack. As for Enlin, because of the special energy released by the Soul Yuan substance, his body became stiff and sluggish, and he didn't even have the chance to escape. Did he really have to give up his life to fight? What a joke. I promised Xiaolan that I wouldn't risk my life anymore. Enlin's eyes gradually turned dark and deep. It was time to use a trump card that he had never used on the Tai Chu continent. Do you in substance destroy? The heavenly earth god spoke in a cold voice as the white substance in his palm surged violently, unleashing a dazzling white light as he prepared to deliver a lethal blow to Enlin. The heavenly earth god had a massive advantage, but there was no hint of triumph on his face. Instead, his expression was extremely grave and filled with wariness. He knew that Enlin was the heavenly darkness god, and he also knew that this was going to be the real battle. This was going to be a battle that posed a threat to him. He didn't want to fight Enlin as he didn't want to force Enlin to unleash his power of darkness. It wasn't a good thing to have a powerful enemy too early in the game. However, he had no other choice now. He could only join forces with the heavenly sea god to slay Enlin. This was both a simple task and a difficult one. After all, no matter how weak Enlin was, he was still the embodiment of darkness, the paramount heavenly god of darkness. No matter how cautious he was, he had to be. Come, Enlin, die and transform into darkness. The heavenly earth god's expression was filled with anticipation. Thump, this was the sound of a beating heart. It wasn't very loud, but it was clearly audible to all of the living beings present. A ball of black suddenly appeared where Enlin's heart was. This was a pure black to the extreme. It was a black that was capable of completely sucking one's mind in. The rampaging solitary substance within Enlin's body seemed to have encountered something, and its light became more and more dazzling. It appeared to be becoming more and more powerful, but the sizzling sound that it was emitting gave away its current situation. When faced with all types of energy, they could change their powers to perfectly suppress those types of energy. However, they really couldn't completely suppress the darkness before them. This was the power of a paramount heavenly god. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The light emanating from the dozen or so thin swords in Enlin's body began to dim. Then, darkness suddenly appeared around the wounds, quickly engulfing the thin swords and sucking them into the darkness. The heavenly earth god hurtled back in retreat upon seeing this, and he stared at Enlin with a grave expression. The power of darkness? What's going on? You're clearly not facing death, so how are you able to use the power of darkness? The solitary substance hadn't unleashed its full power yet, so Enlin's body wasn't in a near-death state at all. This was something that the heavenly earth god was well aware of. Enlin stood silently on the spot with his evil-slaying sword in hand. The injuries on his body were healing at a rate discernible to the naked eye. He was just standing there silently, but he struck one with a sense of extreme peril. The heavenly yin-yang god was clearly quite far away from Enlin, but he was struck by an indescribable sense of asphyxiation when he saw Enlin. This was a goddamn sense of asphyxiation. He was the heavenly god, a paramount heavenly god. However, his body was trembling uncontrollably, as if he would be engulfed and destroyed if he continued to stay here. What's going on? He still has trump cards up his sleeve? The heavenly yin god was astonished. The heavenly sea god's mouth gaped open. What was going on? Wasn't he still alive? Why was he using the power of the heavenly god of darkness? The 5 elemental wheel behind Enlin had already disappeared, as had all of his Tao jades and divine halos. All of them had fused into the darkness in his heart. In the face of darkness, nothing was necessary. All they had to do was be engulfed by the darkness and enhance its power. Boom! And Lin's aura soared explosively once again. He made his way toward the heavenly earth god, and all of the earth he passed by was reduced to a vast expanse of darkness and nothingness. The earth represented matter, and all matter in his wake was annihilated. The heavenly earth god's expression was no longer as calm and collected as before, but he didn't panic either. You're actually able to draw upon a portion of the power of darkness. That's very surprising. But don't forget that you're currently incomplete, while I'm complete. We're both paramount beings, so how can you, whoosh? Before he even had a chance to finish his sentence, a black sword projection had already appeared on the heavenly earth god's chest. Lin had already appeared before the heavenly earth god, and he slashed his sword toward the heavenly earth god, easily tearing his body apart. Darkness descended. Chapter 2064. Within Yutong City. An intense battle was still raging. The heaven-crushing United Army finally had the power to face the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army head-on, and the army of over 50 million undead became the key to turning the tables. All of the Heavenly Human Tribe powerful beings were trying to break through the heaven-crushing United Army's Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, but none of them were able to do so. The mighty figures and super-mighty figures of the heaven-crushing United Army were simply too desperate, and they were able to keep the Heavenly Human Tribe powerful beings at bay. Just as the battle was getting more and more intense, a sudden turn of events drew all of the powerful beings' attention. Look to the west. Why has the sky suddenly darkened? It's not just the sky. Even the earth and everything in this world can't be seen. It's so dark. Just what in the world is that thing? It's so scary. Just looking at it makes my skin crawl. All of the mighty figures were greeted by the sight of an extremely pure ball of darkness in the west. The ball of darkness was like an abyss, but upon closer inspection, it also looked like a black hole that could suck in everything. Even though they didn't know what it didn't diminish their reverence toward it in the slightest. That direction seems to be where sect leader Lin is pursuing heavenly yin-yang god. No way. Is sect leader Lin going to be alright? Such terrifying energy fluctuations definitely can't be unleashed by a normal heavenly god. Could it be that the legendary heavenly darkness god has appeared? My god! Lin has been ambushed by the mysterious heavenly darkness god. I hope God isn't killed by the heavenly darkness god. Some of the powerful beings were already praying in their hearts. Su Xiaolan, who was pursuing the three heavenly gods, turned toward the darkness in the distance with a hint of concern in her eyes. In the western region of the Tai Chu continent, West Sea immortal land above water, gargantuan waves surged violently, obscuring the entire heavens. In the immortal land above water, the sky-sea great array created by the combined efforts of all the experts had already been activated. A gigantic fish-tailed, human-bodied god appeared in front of the immortal land above water. It wielded a golden trident and slashed at the huge wave, splitting it into two. Behind the huge wave, densely packed white figures appeared in his field of vision. The 70 million heavenly human tribe army had already arrived. The West Sea Alliance only had a little over 30 million soldiers, and all of them couldn't help but draw a sharp intake of breath at the sight of so many enemies. Were they going to have to fight one against two? We meet again, Alliance leader Lan, a prism god said with a cold laugh. You've already been surrounded by us, and you have nowhere to go. The heavenly god with his arms crossed over his chest spoke in a majestic manner. Lan Xiaoni wore a set of sky-blue battle robes, and she stood at the forefront of the army. She raised her eyebrows at the heavenly god before her with a sneer. Heavenly mirror god? Heavenly liquid god? These words sound so familiar. You're always talking about surrounding me, but when has it ever succeeded? How are you going to escape this time? The heavenly mirror god and the heavenly liquid god both shuddered upon hearing this, and expressions of humiliation and indignation appeared on their faces. Lan Xiaoni, don't get carried away. Enlin definitely won't be able to save you this time. You're dead meat. The heavenly mirror god screeched. A seductive smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. You've said the same thing to me before. The heavenly mirror god's face convulsed slightly. Why are you wasting your breath on her? We can just kill her. Heavenly god Ming He's eyes were crimson, and he held a black chain in his hand. That's right. If the four of us can capture her once, we can capture her a second time. Heavenly goddess Lanya had a head of blue hair and extremely supple skin. A seductive smile appeared on her face as she said, Big Boss has already instructed us to capture Alliance leader Lan alive. We have to cripple her on the spot before capturing her. Lan Xiaoni harumphed coldly. Come and capture me if you can. She twisted her slender waist, and she quickly swam away from the immortal land above water. The four heavenly gods all smiled cruelly as they flew toward the direction that she was swimming in. My daughter! Lan Xingyang's heart throbbed with pain as he looked at her departing figure. There were countless powerful beings in the West Sea Alliance, but Lan Xiaoni was the only one who could battle heavenly gods. As her father, he couldn't do anything to help her. All he could do was watch as his daughter plunged into danger again and again. Lan Xingyang wasn't the only one who felt this way. All the other powerful beings of the West Sea Alliance were also filled with shame and concern as they looked at Lan Xiaoni's departing figure. Lan Xiaoni was indeed the pillar of the West Sea Alliance, but they could only watch as Lan Xiaoni plunged into danger again and again. This made them feel a deep sense of powerlessness. Alliance leader Lan, wait for me. All of a sudden, a man exuding a terrifying aura rose into the air atop a red cloud before following Lan Xiaoni. This scene broke the momentary silence of the West Sea Alliance. Teach that's Demon Lord Ling Gu. He's following Alliance leader Lan? Cries of surprise erupted from the immortal land above water. Will Demon Lord Egg Eater be able to do it? Don't forget that he's a powerful being from the Heaven-Crushing sect, and he's already at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. I hope he can help Alliance leader Lan. Demon Lord Ling Gu's appearance alleviated the guilt in the hearts of all the powerful beings present. At the very least, Lan Xiaoni's silhouette wasn't as tragic anymore. At the very least, she had someone to fight alongside her. A hint of surprise appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face when she saw the powerful being of the true demon tribe. Why are you here? Ha ha. Heavenly Disciple Enlin gave me a huge opportunity, so I naturally have to fight for him. This is a good opportunity to test my true strength against a heavenly god, Demon Lord Ling Gu said with a heroic expression. Lan Xiaoni was a little dazed. A smile finally appeared on her flawless features. As expected, Big Boss Enlin didn't choose the wrong person. Thank you, Demon Lord Ling Gu. You're welcome. It's my duty. Demon Lord Ling Gu waved a hand. He had eaten 1 billion heavenly human eggs, and had already reached the threshold of the God of Creation stage. He had already reached the limit of the Tao integration stage. Perhaps the opportunity to break through the limit of the Tao integration stage would lie in his battle against a heavenly god? The other 4 heavenly gods didn't stop Demon Lord Ling Gu. Instead, expressions of joy appeared on their faces. It's Demon Lord Ling Gu. He's the one who ate our heavenly human eggs, right? Why is he here now? Does he want to die? Ha ha! What an arrogant B*****. We didn't go looking for him, but he came looking for us. There's no need to leave him alive. Let's just kill him and get our revenge for the 100 million eggs. The 4 heavenly gods chimed in one after another. All of their faces were brimming with joy and excitement. Soon, they found a vast and spacious region of the sea. The heavenly mirror god, heavenly liquid god, heavenly goddess Lanya, and heavenly god Ming, he all pounced toward Lan Xiaoni and Demon Lord Ling Gu at the same time. The greatest battle in the history of the West Sea Alliance had erupted. Chapter 2065. The 70 million heavenly human tribe united army descended upon the city, and pillars of light imbued with the power of the heavens crashed down upon the floating continent like countless shooting stars. The West Sea War God, Imo-Yi, wielded his golden trident, and each of his attacks was earth-shattering, sweeping up waves hundreds of thousands of feet tall and sending tens of thousands of enemy soldiers crashing into the ocean. The West Sea Alliance army of over 30 million also charged toward the 70 million heavenly human tribe united army. Alliance leader Lan has already blocked the most dangerous enemy for us. This heavenly human tribe united army is nothing. Everyone, follow me. Charge! For the Alliance. For the future. All of the West Sea Alliance powerful beings roared in unison. Their enemies had started to turn out in full force, so they naturally couldn't hold back either. They were all fighting to the death, sparing no effort. A spell formation that was powerful enough to topple the entire West Sea finally erupted at this moment. A series of water-type spell techniques, curses, and wind and lightning spell techniques all erupted from the immortal land above water. The ocean began to churn as countless bolts of lightning fell from the sky. Dazzling spell techniques clashed with the pure white holy light, sending shockwaves of energy gale force winds sweeping through the air. Crimson blood and milky white blood dyed the clear ocean a different color. The battle began to develop into an extremely brutal one. Within the ocean tens of thousands of kilometers away from the immortal land above water. This was the center of the most powerful battlefield. I'll deal with Demon Lord Lingu. Give me 3 minutes, and I'll be able to help you deal with Lan Xiaoni. Heavenly God Ming, he swung the black chains around his body. 3 minutes? We'll be able to capture Lan Xiaoni in 3 minutes. Why would we need your help? Heavenly Goddess Lan Yi chuckled. Stop wasting time. Hurry up and attack. The Heavenly Mirror God was well aware of the fact that they couldn't afford to delay any longer, and it immediately urged, complete the mission first. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The Heavenly Mirror God, Heavenly Goddess Lan Yi, and the Heavenly Liquid God pounced toward Lan Xiaoni at the same time. I've already been surrounded by you guys so many times. Do you really think I'm not prepared? A sharp look appeared in the mermaid's eyes. A blue divine halo suddenly appeared above Lan Xiaoni's head. A divine tool, Luotian Menglei, hung in her left hand, and the vast sea sword appeared in her right hand. Her aura quickly rose to an unimaginable level. What? A dazzling sword ray containing the might of the heavens descended from the sky. Empyrean Goddess Lan Yi made the first move. In the face of a sword projection that could easily slice a Dao integration stage super mighty figure in half, Lan Xiaoni couldn't even be bothered to avert her gaze. She slashed her light blue divine sword through the air in an agile arc to change the trajectory of the terrifying sword projection. Rumble! The sword gleam fell from her side. The water splashed like a waterfall for thousands of zhang. However, in the countless splashes of water behind her, a silver-white figure suddenly sprang out of a water droplet. The Heavenly Mirror God used the water droplet as a mirror to perform spatial skipping. Die! It wielded the sharpest mirror in its hand, and a streak of white light flashed through the air before slicing toward Lan Xiaoni's neck. Lan Xiaoni was currently facing Heavenly Goddess Lan Yi's attack. At this speed and from this angle, there was no way she could defend herself with her sword. The Heavenly Mirror God was ecstatic. It had succeeded. However, right at this moment, countless water droplets instantly converged to form a series of immensely powerful water swords, which tore through space and stabbed viciously into the Heavenly Mirror God's body. The Heavenly Mirror God's attack hadn't even landed when its body was pierced by the sharp water blades, and it wailed in agony. Chaotic liquid. The Heavenly Liquid God charged out from the other side of the water mist, and the divine halo above its head glowed brightly. Streaks of black and white liquid imbued with the purest essential power shot forth like spears. Their nature-defying penetrative power allowed them to pulverize the space in front of them for several hundred kilometers. Lan Xiaoni's body swayed, and her slender fishtail swept toward the heavenly liquid god. Boom! The ocean roared, and a sky-encompassing wall of water erupted to nullify the power of the chaotic liquid. At the same time, a pillar of water over 100,000 feet in length shot forth from the ocean like a waterspout, crashing toward the heavenly liquid god and knocking it flying. The slender figure with skin as fair as snow was still standing on the spot, and a blue divine light illuminated the entire ocean. The heavenly sea god is not here, so I, Lan Xiaoni, am the true ruler of this ocean, she said in a gentle voice that was imbued with natural majesty. Don't get cocky. Heavenly goddess Lanya unleashed a boundless sword intent that pulverized the countless water droplets in front of her. She had already activated 6 divine halos, and boundless divine might erupted from her body as she slashed out with her long sword, unleashing an even more terrifying sword intent. Lan Xiaoni whipped her fishtail through the air and lunged toward heavenly goddess Lanya. She gripped her vast sea sword tightly in her slender fingers as she unleashed a series of light blue sword projections. These weren't very powerful sword techniques, but they became extremely terrifying after being enhanced by the power of the heavenly god of water. Bam bam bam! The two of them engaged in an intense battle in the sky. Sword intent clashed again and again, and the sky exploded as the sword intent clashed again and again. Heavenly goddess Lanya was extremely confident in her own sword techniques, but she was forced into retreat by Lan Xiaoni. Lanya, I'll help you. The heavenly liquid god that had been knocked flying by Lan Xiaoni once again unleashed a series of different types of liquid toward Lan Xiaoni. I'll help as well. The heavenly mirror god had repaired its damaged mirror and also joined the battle. Lan Xiaoni wore a calm expression as she faced the combined attacks of the 3 heavenly gods. Boundless divine water revolved around her petite, snowy white body, and she unleashed a myriad of spell techniques to defend herself. Her body was as agile as a loach, and she weaved through the heavenly gods' attacks seamlessly. Whenever an opportunity presented itself, she would bare her sharp fangs and bite down viciously. The 3 heavenly gods became more and more alarmed as they fought. According to their previous estimations, Lan Xiaoni should have been subdued a long time ago. However, not only had she not been subdued, but she was also becoming more and more powerful as the battle progressed. This greatly exceeded the heavenly gods' expectations. Boom! The heavenly mirror god was blasted flying by Lan Xiaoni's water explosion ball. Damn it! How did this mermaid suddenly become so powerful? Could it be because she has multiple divine tools? That's impossible. If a Tao integration stage super mighty figure were to use a divine tool, I would be able to slay him with a single sword strike. Lan Xiaoni's cultivation base has advanced to the Tao integration intermediate stage, and her heavenly affinity with the heavenly god of water has improved as well. Furthermore, she's being restricted by the heavenly Tao's will much less than us. If we were to compare powers of the heavenly gods, we would definitely lose. The higher the cultivation base, the higher the heavenly affinity? This woman's potential is far too terrifying. We can't let her live. We can only beat her up as a group. Let's cripple her together. Let's use our killing techniques together. The 3 heavenly gods were astonished, but they were even more determined to kill Lan Xiaoni. Mirror Light Clone. The heavenly mirror god unleashed over 100 mirrors toward Lan Xiaoni, upon which the Lan Xiaoni clones leaped out of the mirrors and attacked the main Lan Xiaoni. Each clone possessed half of Lan Xiaoni's power. Boom boom boom. Sword intent swept through the ocean. Lan Xiaoni was like an invincible war god as she destroyed one clone after another. I can't hold back anymore. Heavenly goddess Lanya activated her 8 divine halos and leaped into the air above Lan Xiaoni. She bent her long, slender legs, and a purple divine halo appeared on her pristine, white ankles. Gravitational stomp. Boom! Heavenly Goddess Lanya stomped her feet down. The purple halo was like a sledgehammer crashing down from the sky, and there was no way to evade it. In that instant, the entire ocean caved in for several hundred meters, making it appear as if it were a massive bowl. Lan Xiaoni's attention was distracted by the clones, and she was caught off guard by the gravitational stomp. She felt as if her entire body was being torn apart, and she was flung all the way into the ocean. Soul-devouring demonic liquid. The heavenly liquid god took advantage of this opportunity and waved a hand through the air. A series of black, snake-like liquid burrowed into the ocean. The soul-devouring demonic fluid was extraordinarily fast, and it wound itself around Lan Xiaoni's tail, her snowy white arms, her slender waist, and her sleek and beautiful back. Then, it pierced into her skin. Chapter 2066. Excruciating pain shot through her body. This was a pain that penetrated deep into her bones and into her soul. Lan Xiaoni didn't cry out from the force of gravity, but she couldn't help but moan in pain when the soul-devouring demonic liquid bit into her. After being struck by my soul-devouring demonic liquid, her consciousness will become extremely feeble in less than 3 seconds, and her consciousness will be completely engulfed in less than 10 seconds, the heavenly liquid god said in an indifferent voice. Don't accidentally kill her, the heavenly mirror god cautioned. Don't worry. I'll only use it on her for 9 seconds. After that, she'll fall into a dazed state and won't be able to resist us, the heavenly liquid god promised. However, in the next second, the soul-devouring demonic liquid in Lan Xiaoni's body began to tremble violently. What's going on? The heavenly liquid god's expression shifted. Bam bam bam! The soul-devouring demonic liquid exploded at the bottom of the ocean. Lan Xiaoni's entire body was enshrouded in a layer of deep blue liquid, which kept all of the attacks at bay. A series of blue-veined patterns had also appeared all over her body, and these veined patterns shimmered with divine light, creating a stark contrast with her snowy white skin, creating a beautiful contrast. I feel like she's become different. The heavenly liquid god's brows furrowed. In no way. She can become more powerful? The heavenly mirror god stuttered, and its eyes widened to the size of watermelons. Did you hear that? The heavenly liquid god's expression became more and more unsightly. The heavenly mirror god stared at the boundless ocean in astonishment. This is a sound that resonates with the ocean? Lan Xiaoni is resonating with the entire West Sea? Impossible. Once she resonates with the entire West Sea, she'll be able to use the power of the ocean to its fullest extent. Isn't this something that only the heavenly sea god can do? Heavenly goddess Lan Yi was incredulous. The heavenly liquid god looked at Lan Xiaoni's body, which was enshrouded in dark blue liquid. She's a combination of a heavenly god and a life form of the Tai Chu continent. She's already extremely special, and we can't predict what will happen to her. We can't delay any longer. Let's continue. All of the heavenly gods were just about to attack. Heavenly goddess Lan Yi suddenly became nervous, and she stomped her feet through the air. Not good. She's using the power of the ocean to negate my gravity stomp. The heavenly mirror god and the heavenly liquid god's expressions both shifted. At this moment, Lan Xiaoni was like the most agile fish in the ocean. She quickly shifted her position at the bottom of the ocean before suddenly leaping up from beneath the heavenly mirror god. The heavenly mirror god was given a fright, and it immediately tossed out a mirror. Reflect. At this moment, Lan Xiaoni had already launched her fist toward the heavenly mirror god atop her sword. Within the mirror that the heavenly mirror god had tossed out, there was a reflection of Lan Xiaoni that had also unleashed a punch of similar power. It should have been an evenly matched collision. As a result, a loud explosion erupted. Lan Xiaoni's fist had vanquished the Lan Xiaoni in the mirror before viciously smashing the mirror into smithereens. How could this be? The heavenly mirror god's eyes widened. At this moment, the vast sea divine sword, which had been hovering beside Lan Xiaoni this entire time, had already torn through the void toward the heavenly mirror god, slicing the heavenly mirror god's transparent prismatic body in half. Screams reverberated in the sky. Heavenly mirror god! The heavenly liquid god and heavenly goddess Lan Ye pounced toward Lan Xiaoni at the same time. Lan Xiaoni slapped the air toward the two of them, and the ocean surged upward to form two gargantuan palms constructed from divine water, which slammed toward the heavenly liquid god. The speed at which the palms were unleashed was far too fast, and the area encompassed by the palms blotted out the entire sky. The heavenly liquid god was unable to evade in time and was sent flying again. Heavenly goddess Lan Ye gritted her teeth and slashed down with her heavenly sword. She injected the power of her 8 divine halos into her sword, and she finally managed to slice the gargantuan palms in half. However, she didn't even have a chance to heave a sigh of relief before Lan Xiaoni appeared before her with a frosty expression on her face. "Did you just stomp me into the ocean?" Lan Xiaoni grabbed onto Heavenly Goddess Lan Ye's hair. Heavenly Goddess Lan Ye's expression shifted drastically, and she tried to struggle. However, she discovered that an extremely vast power had already descended upon her head through her hair. The regal and proud heavenly goddess Lan Ye was dragged down by Lan Xiaoni by the hair right before the dumbstruck eyes of the heavenly mirror god and the heavenly liquid god. A terrifying explosion swept up raging waves tens of thousands of feet high. Heavenly goddess Lan Ye felt as if the power of the entire ocean was crushing down upon her. This power was unimaginably vast and boundless, and it even gave her the illusion that she was facing the heavenly sea god. This wasn't something that a heavenly god could resist. "Stay here for me." Lan Xiaoni felt an attack coming from behind her, and she unleashed a palm strike toward heavenly goddess Lan Ye's head. Heavenly sea tomb. Bam! Heavenly goddess Lan Ye was smashed into the seabed. 999 tombstones over a kilometer tall rose from the ground. Blue divine light erupted from them, and they formed a special West Sea formation. This formation was connected with the power of the ocean, and it unleashed an extremely terrifying sealing power that completely immobilized Heavenly Goddess Lan Ye. "Come back here! Lan Xiaoni, come back here!" Heavenly Goddess Lan Ye roared with humiliation. She was a heavenly god, but she was being immobilized at the bottom of the ocean. This was an unprecedented humiliation for her. However, the slender figure completely ignored her cries and flew into the distance toward the heavenly liquid god and the heavenly mirror god. Lan Xiaoni couldn't be bothered with her. She was in a hurry. The mystic technique she used was called reverse water chill, and it was a technique that allowed her to overdraft her heavenly god power in exchange for a short period of time. This technique could allow her to unleash the peak power of the heavenly god of water for a short period of time, and it would be no problem for her to beat up 3 or even 4 heavenly gods. However, there was one flaw, and that was that she didn't have enough time. It was unrealistic to kill all of the heavenly gods in such a short period of time. They possessed the undying nature of the heavens, and they would be reborn even if they were sliced in half, so they were extremely difficult to deal with. However, she couldn't kill them, but she could choose to suppress them. That's right, Lan Xiaoni was planning to use the boundless power of the ocean to seal all of the heavenly gods before her. The heavenly mirror god and the heavenly liquid god had initially wanted to take care of Lan Xiaoni, but they instantly cowered upon seeing heavenly goddess Lan Ye pressed into the ground by Lan Xiaoni. "No, 3 against 1 isn't enough. We'll have to fight 4 against 1. The heavenly mirror god spoke in a trembling voice. "Heavenly god Dark River, are you still not done?" The heavenly liquid god yelled. Boom! Countless splashes erupted from the ocean. Heavenly god Dark River crashed into the ocean, which just so happened to be close to the 2 heavenly gods. However, the heavenly mirror god and the heavenly liquid god couldn't bring themselves to be happy. Heavenly god Dark River's mouth was foaming with blood, and his skull had caved in. He looked extremely wretched. Divine heaven stage heavenly human? That's all you've got? Demonic flames surged into the sky. Demon Lord Lingu stood atop a red cloud with his arms crossed over his chest. Chapter 2067. The Heavenly Mirror God and the Heavenly Liquid God were dumbstruck. It was understandable that Heavenly Goddess Lan Yu was being thrashed by Lan Xiaoni. But why was Heavenly God Dark River being thrashed by this melon eater, no, egg eater, no, Demon Lord Lingu? Was Heavenly God Dark River that weak? Heavenly God Dark River was still foaming with blood, and he could sense two pairs of astonished eyes staring at him. He knew that he had definitely been looked down upon by the two heavenly gods. Heavenly Mirror God, Heavenly Liquid God, be careful. This Demon Lord Lingu is very powerful. Heavenly God Dark River reminded his teammates not to underestimate their enemy. The Heavenly Mirror God and the Heavenly Liquid God were both speechless and dazed. They felt like they were too naive to expect their teammates to help them. Heavenly God Dark River, let me warn you as well. Lan Xiaoni is even more powerful, the Heavenly Mirror God said in despair. Boom, boom, boom. His voice had only just fallen when waves began to surge. Hundreds of millions of tons of water crashed violently against the three heavenly gods. This was a boundless power that struck even heavenly gods with a sense of boundless power. And this was merely the power of the heavenly gods that Lan Xiaoni had unleashed as she swung her fishtail toward the three heavenly gods. Heavenly God Dark River's heart jolted upon seeing Lan Xiaoni. This is Lan Xiaoni? When did she become so powerful? The Heavenly Liquid God and the Heavenly Mirror God both wore bitter expressions. Who were they supposed to ask? Didn't they know that Heavenly Goddess Lan Yu was still trapped at the bottom of the ocean? The Heavenly Liquid God and the Heavenly Mirror God began to unleash spell techniques in retaliation. However, Lan Xiaoni felt as if she had returned to her home turf after returning to the ocean. She evaded the attacks of the two heavenly gods with unimaginably agile movement technique. Even if she couldn't evade, she would still be able to slice through the attacks with her vast sea divine sword. She charged toward them at an extremely fast speed, and an unprecedentedly dazzling light erupted from her divine halo. Heavenly God Technique, Myriad Tribulations Ocean Abyss. Around the three heavenly gods, countless whirlpools suddenly appeared in the ocean. Each of them covered an area of over 100 kilometers. Their insides were as dark as ink, and their exteriors were as sharp as heavenly blades that could cut through anything. Moreover, they all had an extremely terrifying suction force, as if they wanted to completely tear the heavenly gods' bodies apart. Regardless of whether it was the Heavenly Liquid God, the Heavenly Mirror God, or the Heavenly Dark River God, all of them felt as if their bodies had been immobilized. They wanted to escape, but they were completely unable to do so. The entire ocean belonged to Lan Xiaoni, and it was helping Lan Xiaoni to trap them. Wait, my opponent is Demon Lord Lingu, how can you attack me? Heavenly God Ming, he was dumbstruck. Lan Xiaoni was going to eat him as well. Demon Lord Lingu was also astonished. He had only reached the threshold of the God of Creation stage by digesting 1 billion heavenly human eggs. Furthermore, his mastery of heaven-crushing techniques was quite impressive, and he was able to unleash the power of a heavenly disciple candidate. Furthermore, he also had the heaven-crushing formation, which was why he was able to dominate Heavenly God Styx River on his own. But what about Lan Xiaoni? She was merely playing around with the power of the Heavenly God of Water, and she had completely disregarded him. She was targeting 3 heavenly gods right off the bat. Wasn't that a little too arrogant? However, Demon Lord Lingu soon discovered that his worries were unfounded. Lan Xiaoni charged toward the Heavenly Mirror God. Mirror Reflection, Boundless Realm. The Heavenly Mirror God panicked, and it unleashed another trump card. It waved a hand through the air, and 2 round objects that were as clear as heavenly mirrors began to face each other. Another image appeared within the mirror, and the mirror within the mirror reflected the other mirror. Thus, the mirror within the mirror, the boundless realm. In the end, the boundless realm materialized into reality and became the heavenly mirror god's boundless realm defense. A limited amount of power would not be able to break through its boundless realm defense. Lan Xiaoni slashed her sword toward the mirror before her, and the peerlessly sharp sword projection instantly shattered tens of thousands of mirror fragments. However, there was no end in sight to the mirror fragments that remained. The heavenly mirror god heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. A smile appeared on its face. "Don't waste your energy. This is my absolute defense. Even if a god of creation were to stand before me, I would still be able to defend myself, let alone you." Lan Xiaoni sheathed her long sword with an indifferent expression. "Isn't that easy to break through? Boundless realm mirror? All boundless things have a source that created them. All you have to do is destroy their source." She suddenly closed her eyes. The raging ocean was instantly plunged into a moment of silence. "Did you hear that?" Lan Xiaoni's voice was gentle and calm. "Hear what?" The heavenly mirror god faltered for an instant. "Hear the sound of the ocean?" Lan Xiaoni spoke in a slow voice. "The heavenly mirror god. It has already told me where your source is." Lan Xiaoni pointed a finger toward a certain direction in the air. The space around her shattered into countless shards like glass, immediately following which the boundless mirror images popped like bubbles. The heavenly mirror god's eyes widened. There was only one thought in its mind. Could the ocean really speak? At this moment, a slender, fair hand pressed down upon the heavenly mirror god's head. Boom! A terrifying power crashed down. The heavenly mirror god let loose a sharp cry as it was pressed into the ocean by Lan Xiaoni. Heavenly ocean tomb! Boom boom boom! 999 massive tombstones over a kilometer in length rose from the ground around the heavenly mirror god. A vast divine light erupted from them, drawing upon the power of the entire ocean to completely immobilize it. It could finally empathize with heavenly goddess Lan Ya's feelings. That feeling of humiliation and powerlessness was truly unbearable. However, it was facing the suppression of the entire West Ocean, so it was impossible for it to turn the tables. Heavenly Mirror God. The Heavenly Liquid God and Heavenly Dark River God both let loose cries of shock upon seeing this. "No, she's too powerful. Let's retreat for now. She's suddenly becoming more powerful, so there must be a time limit. We'll retaliate once the time is up," the Heavenly Liquid God said decisively. "All right, let's split up and flee." Empyrean god Stygian River felt that this was indeed the case. They were about to escape from the whirlpool at the bottom of the ocean by using a secret technique that had severe side effects when countless black magic balls suddenly fell into the ocean and surrounded them from all directions, releasing a horrifying power. "You want to escape? Have you asked for my permission?" Demon Venerable Ling Gu said majestically. The two Empyrean gods couldn't be bothered to speak and directly chose to force their way through. Boom 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 boom. The black magic balls began to explode, and black energy expanded outward in a spherical manner. The terrifying energy caused the entire ocean to churn and churn. The Heavenly Liquid God and Heavenly Dark River God unleashed their respective divine techniques to withstand the countless exploding black magic balls as they fled into the distance. They were extremely disheveled, and they were also extremely depressed. They were very experienced in surrounding and killing Lan Xiaoni. Even though they were crushed by Enlin every single time, they weren't discouraged. After all, Enlin was very powerful. After ensuring that Enlin wouldn't come to their rescue, they became even more excited and decided to wipe away the humiliation they had suffered. But what was going on? Enlin wasn't going to come to their rescue, so why was it Lan Xiaoni who was going to come to their rescue? This was way too tragic. Chapter 2068. The Heavenly Liquid God and Heavenly God Ming River continued to flee into the distance. Heavenly God Ming River's fighting prowess was inferior to Demon Lord Ling Gu's, but if he really wanted to leave, Demon Lord Ling Gu wouldn't be able to force him to stay. They weren't running away. This was a strategic retreat. However, the heavenly liquid god hadn't even traveled 500 kilometers when an extremely terrifying aura closed in from behind. Lan Xiaoni had caught up again. She seemed to have become one with the ocean, and she swam through the ocean at a speed that even the heavenly gods couldn't fathom. She was much faster than normal spatial travel, and she could even move as she pleased. However fast her heart was, she was as fast as she was fast. The heavenly liquid god panicked, and it waved a hand through the air, upon which countless streams of liquid of different attributes shot forth. Some were terrifyingly hot, some were extremely poisonous, and some were seamless. Lan Xiaoni evaded all of the heavenly liquid god's attacks with an even more agile movement technique. She gripped the Luotian Menglai in her left hand, and a dazzling light dazzled the heavenly liquid god for a split second. When the heavenly liquid god came to its senses, she was already behind it. "What are you running for? Get down here!" A palm crashed down. Rumble! The heavenly liquid god let loose a wail of anguish as it was slammed into the seabed. A series of tombstones rose from the ground, emanating a boundless blue divine light. The power of the entire West Sea suppressed the heavenly liquid god firmly into the seabed. Lan Xiaoni didn't stop and continued toward the heavenly god Ming River. Demon Lord Linggu was trying to think of a way to delay the heavenly god Ming River. The heavenly god didn't get far, and Lan Xiaoni soon caught up to it. Then, she slammed a palm into the seabed and suppressed it with the heavenly ocean tomb. It really wasn't easy. I really admire Alliance Masterland's methods. Demon Lord Linggu looked at the beautiful mermaid beside him with admiration in his eyes. It was really hard to imagine that such a delicate and adorable mermaid princess could actually suppress 4 heavenly gods single-handedly. Let's not waste any more time. Let's break the seal on one of the heavenly gods and kill it together. I feel like the heavenly mirror god is quite weak. Should we start with it? Demon Lord Linggu suggested. There's no need for that. Just repress it like this. Lan Xiaoni shook her head. Demon Venerable Linggu was taken aback when he heard that. He hurriedly asked, "Why? Didn't you suppress them here to prevent them from escaping so that you could defeat them one by one?" As soon as he finished speaking, the divine patterns on Lan Xiaoni's snowy white skin began to fade, and the divine halo above her head also became extremely dim before disintegrating into specks of light. "Alliance leader Lan Yu." Demon Sovereign Linggu looked at the woman whose aura was rapidly weakening, and he suddenly understood what was going on before he could finish his sentence. So there was a price to pay for such power. Lan Xiaoni sealing the heavenly god was the best choice. He nervously turned his gaze to the Empyrean god below. The heavenly gods were still suppressed at the bottom of the sea, enduring the might of the entire Western Sea. Linggu heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "We've finally won this battle." "That's right. We've finally won." Lan Xiaoni didn't look down at the bottom of the sea. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the east with a gentle and affectionate look in her eyes. "Big Boss and Lin, do you see this? Xiaoni did it. Even if the 4 heavenly gods were to attack, Xiaoni would be able to keep them at bay. You don't have to come and save me anymore. Xiaoni can also become someone useful to you." She thought back to the figure that made her feel warm and at ease. If he knew about this, he would definitely turn around and rub her head, saying things like, "Underling Lan has grown up. You've really made me proud." Just thinking about it made her a little excited. A blush appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face as she thought about this, and her beautiful blue eyes were about to tear up. Big Boss and Lin, Demon Lord Linggu looked at the mermaid beside him, who was staring toward the east with an infatuated expression. She was even twisting her body incessantly, and he couldn't help but ask, Alliance leader Lan?" A dignified expression appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face as she coughed lightly. "The heavenly gods have been taken care of. Let's go and defeat the rest of the heavenly human tribe united army." "All right, that's exactly what I was thinking." Demon Lord Lingu was full of fighting spirit. At this moment, outside the West Sea Alliance, the heavenly human tribe had already suffered over 6 million casualties. The West Sea Alliance had the home ground advantage and the Heavenly Sea formation, but their casualties were no less than the heavenly human tribes. They had also suffered over 6 million casualties. The battle here was very realistic. There was no such thing as a situation where the enemy was outnumbered. The heavenly human tribe united army's morale was very high. Charge! Keep charging! We have to take down the immortal land above water within a day. We don't even need a day. When the 4 heavenly gods return, the West Sea Alliance army will be completely annihilated. Die, die, die! The heavenly human tribe united army roared in battle. Even the gargantuan body of the West Sea war god Amoyi was forced into retreat by the combined attacks of a dozen or so Heaven Pioneer stage great generals, and he looked like he was about to collapse. However, right at this moment the ocean suddenly surged and roared. A sea dragon over 100,000 feet in length rose from the ocean before opening its cavernous mouth and roaring as it pounced toward one of the heavenly human tribe great generals. The heavenly human tribe great general's expression shifted drastically, and he immediately summoned a pillar of the power of the heavens to attack the water dragon. However, the water dragon contained the supreme laws of nature and was extremely powerful. When it was bombarded by the powerful power of heaven, its body only shook like a ripple. It didn't even cause a big splash. How is this possible? The heavenly human tribe great general was astonished, and he tried to flee. However, the water dragon was simply too fast, and it reached him in the blink of an eye before swallowing him whole, leaving him no chance to react. The heavenly human tribe great general's blood-curdling cries erupted from within the water dragon's stomach. Due to the fact that the water dragon was semi-transparent, the heavenly human tribe united army could see the heavenly human tribe great general's body being torn apart bit by bit, and all of the powerful beings present were struck by a sense of horror. Gasp! That water dragon, it insta-killed a Heaven Pioneer stage great general? Who is it? Both the heavenly human tribe united army and the West Sea Alliance were astonished. It was also at this moment that a blue divine light lit up the entire sky, as if a vast ocean were surging in the sky. A woman with the human body of a mermaid and the body of a human in a battle robe flew over from the ocean atop another water dragon over 100,000 feet in length. She was a breathtaking sight, and her aura surged into the heavens. That's Lan Xiaoni. How could this be? Why is she here? Where are our heavenly gods? All of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings were dumbstruck by the sight of the woman flying toward them. An authoritative voice reverberated throughout the entire battlefield. All of the heavenly gods have been sealed by me. All West Sea Alliance soldiers, heed my command. It's time to retaliate, and don't let a single heavenly human tribe powerful being escape. Charge! Lan Xiaoni's voice reverberated throughout the entire battlefield, and it was extremely inspiring. All of the West Sea Alliance soldiers were on the verge of tears of joy upon hearing that even the heavenly gods had been sealed. Alliance leader Lan had created another miracle. She was as tragic as her departure, and her triumphant return was just as dazzling. The morale of the West Sea Alliance was at an all-time high. Alliance leader Lan is invincible. Charge! For Alliance leader Lan. For the glory of the West Sea Alliance. Exterminate all of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings. The West Sea Alliance army of over 20 million poured forth in full force to launch the most ferocious retaliation in the history of the heavenly human tribe united army. Chapter 2069. All 4 heavenly gods have been defeated? Impossible. That's absolutely impossible. How could Lan Xiaoni and Demon Lord Lingu defeat all 4 of us? The 60 million heavenly human tribe united army had also heard Lan Xiaoni's words, but they were unable to believe this was the truth. Never would they have thought that this would happen. However, the massive water dragon continued to pounce toward another great general, and it looked like it was going to devour the next great general. Demon Lord Ling Gu also sprang into action, slaughtering his way through the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. Without the heavenly gods holding him back, he was invincible. Lan Xiaoni and Demon Lord Ling Gu were both displaying their invincible combat prowess on the battlefield, but where were the heavenly gods? This was the cruel reality. No matter how incredulous the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was, the battle before their eyes told them the truth. The heavenly gods had indeed been slain. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had clearly held the upper hand, but it was slowly beginning to show signs of collapse. This was the massive impact that top-rate combat prowess had on the battlefield. There was no one on the battlefield who could keep Lan Xiaoni and Demon Lord Ling Gu in check. Large batches of casualties began to appear, and even the great generals were beginning to feel threatened. If this battle continued, there was no way they could win. On top of that, the deaths of the 4 heavenly gods had also impacted the morale of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, and some of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army began to contemplate retreating. Finally, another Heavenly Human Tribe Great General was devoured by the Water Dragon, and another Heavenly Human Tribe Great General was blasted to death by Demon Lord Ling Gu. The morale of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was finally beginning to crumble. "Heed my command, retreat!" A Heavenly Human Tribe Great General roared as he raised his sword. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army began to retreat like a receding tide. "Don't let them go! Charge!" The West Sea Alliance Army chased after the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, reaping lives in a frenzy. This was the perfect moment to reap the spoils of war. Above the West Sea, an army of over 20 million was chasing after an army of over 60 million. This was an extremely peculiar scene on the West Sea. Lan Xingyang controlled Amoyi to chase after the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, and every time he swung his golden trident through the air, it would sweep up massive waves and devastating gale-force winds, inflicting tens of thousands of casualties on the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. He looked at the back of his daughter, who was still fighting at the forefront. Her battle prowess was unparalleled, and she was invincible. She was like the sun in the West Sea that would never fall. For some reason, Lan Xingyang felt a wave of sorrow and heartache. He knew exactly what Lan Xiaoni had endured to become so powerful. His daughter's growth in just 100 years could only be described as terrifying. She had transformed from a frail girl who loved to cry into the leader of the West Sea. How big of a transformation was that? It wasn't just hard work, but also the fear of the unknown, the pressure from terrifying enemies, the pressure of distrust from allies, as well as the countless hardships and life-and-death battles. How could a crybaby walk like this all the way? What was it that supported her to not collapse? Lan Xingyang felt that all of this was related to that man. He was the man who had bullied Lan Xiaoni, deceived all of the powerful beings of the West Sea, then left in a willful and irresponsible manner, and even faked his death for 100 years. If it weren't for the Divine Phoenix Maiden, Lan Xingyang would most likely pay that man a visit in person and ask him when he would be able to turn his daughter into his big brother's woman. Lan Xingyang couldn't help but glance toward the east. He didn't know what that man was doing. The sun slowly set. A ball of golden light with a hint of fiery red light hung in the sky. Night had already fallen. On the battlefield at the very center of the Tai Chu continent, there was a ball of darkness that was extremely eye-catching, as if it were the leader of the night. There was a youth with a greenish-yellow divine halo above his head, and his body was a semi-transparent amber. There was pure darkness tearing at his chest, as if it were a wound that was going to engulf him sooner or later. This wounded youth was the heavenly earth god, who struck fear into the hearts of the entire continent. He was the paramount representative of the heavenly Tao, the most powerful being of the heavenly human tribe, and one of the most powerful enemies of the entire human race. He's so fast, the heavenly earth god stared at the man who had just unleashed his sword strike with astonishment. He had thought that the man before him wouldn't be a match for him, as he hadn't completely released his power of darkness. After all, both of them were paramount beings, and he was a complete paramount heavenly god. However, at this moment, this thought seemed so laughable. He had overlooked a very important point. The heavenly Tao's subconsciousness was able to suppress him, and it was able to suppress Enlin completely differently. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Brilliant light erupted from the white liquid before transforming into countless golden blades that pierced toward Enlin's chest. Enlin flicked his wrist, and his evil-slaying sword transformed into a series of black afterimages that instantly sliced through all of the oncoming golden blades into nothingness. He wasn't just slicing through them or slicing them into molecules. Instead, he was completely erased along with the entire liquid before him. The heavenly earth god hurtled back in retreat, and his expression darkened even further upon seeing this. So even the solitary substance can't do anything to you. Who would have thought that you would be able to unleash the power of darkness to such an extent? Enlin didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the heavenly earth god in silence. He seemed to have become a completely different person. His expression was extremely cold, and he didn't care about anything. He didn't even have any interest in flexing anymore. The only thought in his mind was to destroy the heavenly earth god. Enlin made his way toward the heavenly earth god, and the earth and sky behind him had become pure darkness. The darkness struck fear into the hearts of all the heavenly gods. Compared to the heavenly earth god, Enlin was like a true heavenly god. He was cold and aloof, and his divine might surged into the heavens. He was mysterious and unfathomable, carrying out the paramount will of the heavens. Is this really Enlin? The heavenly yin-yang god's voice was trembling slightly. He was the master of yin and yang, and darkness was theoretically related to yin as well. However, he had never seen such darkness before. This was a darkness that even he, who was most familiar with yin and yang, couldn't understand. It was quite clear that the darkness before his eyes had already transcended beyond the realm of his knowledge. It was too pure. It represented both nothingness and destruction, as well as tranquility and eternity. Even though he was also a heavenly god, he was struck by a sense of inexplicable horror. Heavenly Sea God, Enlin is already in such a sorry state, are you still not going to do anything? The heavenly yin-yang god asked with an extremely nervous expression. The heavenly sea god was still in a daze, and he came to his senses upon hearing this. Do anything? The heavenly earth god hasn't told me to do anything yet. It would be a bad idea to disrupt his battle. The heavenly sea god spoke with a serious expression. Even if he tells me to do anything, I won't do anything. Things seemed to have gone beyond his expectations again. However, that was alright. This was a good thing for him, wasn't it? Right at this moment, Enlin took a step forward and charged toward the heavenly earth god again. Chapter 2070. Enlin's speed was extremely fast, and nothing between heaven and earth could impede his footsteps. Everything that stood in his way was engulfed by his darkness. The evil-slaying sword slashed down upon the heavenly earth god. Do you really think I can't do anything to you just because I can't suppress you? The heavenly earth god's eyes narrowed, and he evaded Enlin's sword strike with an extremely intricate movement technique before clenching his fist and launching an almighty fist toward the white-robed man before him. Bam! The power of the heavenly gods surged. The absolute power of the boundless earth crashed down viciously upon Enlin, and the power of the fist encompassed heaven and earth, leaving Enlin nowhere to run. That's right, there was no way to evade this punch. A grave expression appeared on Enlin's face, and he quickly drew his sword back to defend himself. At this moment, the fist had already struck his sword. Heaven and earth fell completely silent in that instant. Immediately afterward, an earth-shattering explosion erupted. Boom! The earth was being torn apart, and the heavens were collapsing. Boundless bluish-yellow energy exploded forth, crashing into the expanse of absolute darkness in a frenzy. From afar, it looked as if the black and the bluish-yellow were clashing. The heavenly earth god had injected all of his power into this fist. The entire Tai Chu continent resonated with him, and the boundless power of the earth converged toward his fist, which crashed down upon the white-robed man with the power of the entire Tai Chu continent. The darkness behind Enlin surged violently, and it was even showing signs of receding. The earth represented matter, while the darkness represented nothingness. These were two completely different elements. This was the first clash between matter and nothingness. The sky and earth had lost all color, and everything in this world had been replaced by the boundless power of the earth and the pure power of darkness. The heavenly yin-yang god and the heavenly sea god were both knocked back by the shockwaves from the clash. Even the oceanic cage around them had been torn apart. This clash was far too exaggerated. Not only was it massive, but it was also lasting for a very long time. On the battlefield at Yutong City, which was extremely far away, not only were all of the powerful beings watching, but even the normal soldiers were also able to see the clash in the west. At the end of the horizon that was dyed red by the setting sun, a greenish-yellow color and darkness were madly clashing and strangling each other. A terrifying power completely covered this part of the world. Heavens, what level of battle is this? I can sense the boundless true intent of the heavenly earth god from it. There's no mistaking it. That bluish-yellow energy is definitely the power of the heavenly earth god. It can't be. Could it be that the earth and the darkness are fighting? What's going on? All the experts were dumbfounded. They had no idea what was happening in the distance. Weren't the mysterious heavenly darkness god and the domineering heavenly earth god supposed to be enemies of the human race? How did they end up fighting each other? And what role did Enlin play in all of this? All the living beings on the battlefield were at a loss. However, no matter what, a battle between two utmost beings would most likely be beneficial to them. On the massive battlefield, only Su Xiaolan, the battling Buddha, Yun Menjing, Michael, and the others knew what that darkness represented. Some of them were worried, some of them were excited, and some of them wanted nothing more than to abandon the battle before them and rush over to spectate. This was a battle between two paramount heavenly gods. Who wouldn't want to spectate? The sun gradually sank below the horizon, and the colors of dusk became even dimmer. The bluish-yellow energy and the power of darkness were still clashing and clashing. The power of the earth was drawn from the entire Tai Chu continent, and it could be said that there was no end to it. Meanwhile, the power of darkness was profound and eternal. No matter how violently the power of the earth attacked, it showed no signs of weakening, and no one knew when it would stop. The heavenly earth god's fist crashed down upon Enlin with unstoppable force. Enlin wielded his evil-slaying sword in front of him, and also tried his best to ram his sword down upon the heavenly earth god's body. Black sword intent erupted forth, slicing through the heavenly earth god's body relentlessly. The impasse between the two of them lasted longer than expected. The heavenly yin-yang god was very astonished. Never would he have thought that Enlin would be able to hold his own against the heavenly earth god for so long. Did he already possess paramount heavenly god power? However, he soon began to think again. The heavenly yin-yang god shot a series of meaningful glances at the heavenly sea god, but the heavenly sea god acted as if he didn't see them at all. The heavenly yin-yang god was very anxious. Heavenly sea god, the two of them are currently in a stalemate. If you enter the fray, you'll be able to break the stalemate and kill Enlin with ease. Enlin's latent potential and power are far too terrifying. We can't let him live. We have to kill him now. If we allow him to continue to live, he'll be a huge threat in the future. The heavenly yin-yang god tried to persuade the heavenly sea god. The heavenly sea god remained unmoved. Disturbing the heavenly earth god at a time like this would be an insult to him. I won't step in unless he asks for my help in person, the heavenly sea god said. The heavenly yin-yang god's face convulsed as he looked at the heavenly earth god, who was battling Enlin. The heavenly earth god was completely focused on defending against Enlin, and he couldn't even say a single word. How was he supposed to ask for help from the heavenly earth god? He wasn't going to say that as he had suddenly thought of a good idea. If the heavenly sea god didn't want to step in, he could do it himself. The heavenly earth god couldn't bring himself to ask for help, so he, the heavenly yin-yang god, could take the initiative. The heavenly earth god would reprimand him on the surface, but perhaps his impression of him would improve a lot? Besides, at a time like this, getting rid of enemies that harm the heavens was the right thing to do. That was what the heavenly gods were supposed to do, and they had to do it at all costs. Wasn't it a joke to say that it was for the sake of pride in battle? After coming to this conclusion, the heavenly yin-yang god was no longer burdened. His body suddenly flashed, and he tore through space before charging toward Enlin at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, he wielded his black and white dual blades and roared, "Heavenly Earth God, I'll lend you a hand. I, the heavenly yin-yang god, will break the stalemate between the two sides. I, the heavenly yin-yang god, will be the one to end this battle. I will crush the arrogant Enlin into the dust and trample him beneath my feet." This was the most critical moment as well as the most critical turning point for the heavenly Tao. I'll be the one to decide everything. A sense of heroism welled up in the heavenly yin-yang god's heart. He wielded his yin and yang dual blades, and a massive yin-yang twin fish formation appeared behind him. The formation rotated endlessly, as if it had encompassed all of the mysterious powers of this world. All of this power then converged onto the black and white dual blades, thereby maximizing the power of the dual blade. Heavenly God Technique, Yin-Yang slash of Heaven and Earth. The heavenly Yin-Yang God didn't underestimate Enlin, and he immediately unleashed his killing technique. The black and white dual blades slashed down upon the darkness before him with boundless might. The heavenly yin-yang god's original intention was to break the stalemate between the two sides. It would be best if he could sever Enlin's head as well. However, to his surprise, his black blade had only just been unleashed when his yin-yang slash of heaven and earth fused into the darkness before him in an extremely peculiar manner. It was as if a drop of water had fallen into a deep pond, and it didn't even make a single ripple. How is this possible? The heavenly yin-yang god's eyes widened. Before he had a chance to react, his white blade was sucked away by the bluish-yellow energy behind him. It was as if the white blade was a delicacy to the bluish-yellow energy and could replenish its energy. The heavenly yin-yang god had charged toward Enlin with his yin-yang dual blades in his hands, but one of his weapons had been swallowed by an enemy, while the other had been stolen by an ally. He stood awkwardly between the battle between Enlin and the heavenly earth god. Chapter 2071. The heavenly yin god's killing technique had been nullified before he even had a chance to unleash it. This made him feel extremely embarrassed and humiliated. Could it be that he had come here to deliver his twin blades to these two? He was clearly trying to become a bad *SS who could change the course of this battle, so how did he end up as a stupid C***T? Was there something wrong with him? The heavenly earth god and Enlin's expressions remained calm, and neither of them changed their course of action. Instead, they continued to clash with one another. The heavenly yin god felt like he had been completely ignored and humiliated, and he glowered at the white-robed man before him with rage and killing intent. "I'm already here, Enlin, and you're not even blinking? Don't you know that you're about to be killed by me?" The heavenly yin god was just about to continue his attack. Right at this moment, he felt as if something was wrong with his body, as if it was no longer under his control. His heart jolted with shock, and he focused his attention on his own body, only to discover that his body was being tightly gripped by two terrifying powers. His body was composed of black and white halves. At this moment, the black half was being drawn toward the darkness before him, as if it were going to fuse into the darkness at any moment. Meanwhile, the white half was being pulled toward him by the power of the earth behind him, as if there was something in his body that the power of the earth required to decide the outcome of this battle. Ah! The heavenly God was unable to move, but his body was being torn in half, and he howled with pain. In a top-tier battle, any energy source could decide the outcome of the battle. Both the power of darkness and the power of the earth were fighting over the heavenly God. To them, the heavenly God was nothing more than a takeaway. The heavenly God's blood-curdling cries reverberated throughout heaven and earth. The heavenly God was filled with remorse, and tears were about to flow from his eyes. Previously, he was still dissatisfied with the neglect of the two powerhouses. Now that the two powerhouses paid attention to him, they treated him like food. This made him experience a wave of yin and yang imbalance, a feeling that was worse than death. Rip. In the end, the heavenly God's body was still torn in half. The black half of his body fused into the darkness behind Enlil. The white half of his body was dragged into the heavenly earth God's power of the earth. The power of both sides seemed to have increased by a level. Then, they continued to collide. The heavenly sea god looked on coldly from high in the sky. The heavenly sea god really couldn't be bothered to say anything about heavenly yin-yang god seeking death. A weakling wanted to break the balance of the battle between the strong? You want to dominate the battlefield? What a joke. Everything that was happening in front of him was reality. Weaklings didn't even have the qualifications to stand in front of them. Even if they went over, they would just be sending themselves to their death. It was literally food delivery. Above the void, black and white lights converge. Very soon, the heavenly yin-yang god's figure reappeared. He half knelt in the void and panted heavily. There was an unconcealable fear on his face. Oh? He actually didn't die? I have to admit that you're quite capable as a yin-yang god. A hint of surprise appeared on the heavenly sea god's face upon seeing the heavenly yin-yang god's reappearance. The heavenly yin-yang god was still panting heavily and didn't want to speak to the heavenly sea god. At that moment, he also thought he was going to die. If he hadn't reacted fast enough and successfully triggered the yin and yang of heaven and earth to create a chance of survival for him at the moment of being torn apart, he would have been eaten alive by those two fellows. Gotcha! Countless cracks began to appear on the heavenly yin-yang god's divine halo. The heavenly yin-yang god's heart throbbed with pain and remorse upon seeing this. He shouldn't have interfered with their battle. Why did he have to flex and try to steal the limelight? Serves him right. The darkness before me is even more like darkness than the yin-type power that I wield. He possesses the most essential power of darkness. And now, he can use this power to oppose the heavenly earth god's power of earth. The heavenly yin-yang god was still astonished by Enlin's identity. Is he the true darkness? The heavenly sea god smiled and didn't say anything. At this moment, if the heavenly yin-yang god still hadn't figured out Enlin's true identity, then he would have to be as intelligent as the heavenly weather god. At this moment, Enlil and the heavenly earth god were still clashing with one another. The only thing that remained unchanged was that the heavenly yin-yang god had no intention of intervening. He was as quiet as an obedient little chick. In the eastern region of the Tai Chu continent, Wind Plain State, hundreds of thousands of kilometers of land in the northern region had been blanketed in snow and wind. Over 2 billion humans had been buried under the boundless snow and wind. The snow and wind were still trying to descend south with the power of extreme frost, but they were stopped at the center of the Wind Plain State by a massive spell formation. This was none other than the god of creation stage myriad spirit great ultimate formation. It kept the extreme frost natural disaster, which was powerful enough to destroy the entire kingdom of the 9 states, at bay. The 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect was the spell formation core of the Myriad Spirit Great Ultimate Formation, and an earth-shattering battle was taking place there. The outcome of this battle would determine the fate of the human race in the kingdom of the 9 states. Deafening explosions rang out over and over again on the ground. The ring of fire around the 10,000 spirits immortal sect had already been completely torn apart by the snow ghost beasts, and over 50 million snow ghost beasts surged into the 10,000 spirits immortal sect territory in a frenzy. There were already over 30 million snow ghost beast carcasses on the ground, but there were simply too many of them. Even the 4-9 immortal sect's most powerful cultivators were struck by despair. One mountain after another collapsed, and countless spirit immortal sect disciples were buried under the rubble. There were even some elite members of the 4-9 immortal sect who had been sacrificed, and there were even a few returned to void stage mighty figures who had fallen. The setting sun descended upon the earth, and a few stars appeared in the night sky. The Starfire battleship soared through the air, and its cannon fire never ceased. Boom, boom, boom. A series of dazzling explosions erupted on the ground. Up to this point, close to 20 million snow ghost beasts had fallen to the Starfire battleship's cannon fire. After being modified by Bai Ling's advanced technology, the Starfire battleship was responsible for cleaning up enemies, and it was far more powerful than a Dao integration stage super mighty figure. However, even such an invincible battleship was becoming more and more vulnerable. Big Sister Bai. Our battleship is out of energy, and we're about to run out of backup energy as well. Lu Qianhuan's voice sounded with anxiety and exasperation. Bai Ling stood at the forefront of the battleship and looked at the vast expanse of snow ghost beasts before her. She knew that if the cannon fire stopped, the army of snow ghost beasts would definitely engulf them all. She had to maintain their suppressive fire. Bai Ling was caught between a rock and a hard place. At this moment, a handsome man in a flowing white robe landed beside Bai Ling. He looked at the cannons that were becoming more and more feeble, and a smile appeared on his face. Pavilion Lord Bai Ling, please use my power. Bai Ling clenched her fists tightly as she looked at the man before her. Xianyuan Qing. We haven't reached that point yet. Let me see if there are any other ways. Xianyuan Qing looked at the collapsed mountains and the lifeless white-robed cultivators lying on the ground before shaking his head. No, it'll be too late if we don't make a decision now. Bai Ling gritted her teeth. You have to realize that if we completely activate your power and exhaust your latent potential, your immortal path could very well be ruined. Xianyuan Qing's expression was firm. So many brothers and sisters have already sacrificed themselves before me, so why can't I, Xianyuan Qing, sacrifice myself? Not to mention ruining my immortal cultivation, even if you want my life, so what? Bai Ling. Several seconds of silence ensued. Several long seconds passed. Bai Ling finally took a deep breath, and a hint of determination appeared on her face. All right, let's begin. 4-9 True Yang Plan, activate. Chapter 2072. Within the core cockpit of the Starfire battleship, the spatial gate connected to the crystal opened, and Lu Qianhuan, who was dressed in a sorceress outfit, emerged from within. She looked at the man before her with a complex expression. Who would have thought that I, the Starfire battleship maiden, would have to yield my position one day? A warm smile appeared on Xianyuan Qing's face. Don't worry, I'm only going to use it once. I probably won't get another chance in the future. Lu Qianhuan bit down on her lower lip. What are you talking about? I'm a very generous person, and I'll let you do it if you want to in the future. So take care of yourself and don't force yourself. Just unleash a few cannons, and I'll take care of everything outside. Xianyuan Qing made his way into the cabin. If I really can't come back, then Shu Honglan. All right, I'll make sure Shu Honglan finds happiness. Lu Qianhuan nodded. Xianyuan Qing. So if you don't want Shu Honglan to be with me, then you'd better live a good life. Lu Qianhuan spoke with a serious expression. A warm feeling welled up in Xianyuan Qing's heart, and he nodded lightly. The cabin door began to close, and the spiritual connection began on the Starfire battleship. An exceptional sword immortal descended from the sky. A black-furred snow ghost beast immediately pounced toward the sword immortal upon seeing this. The black-furred snow ghost beast's combat prowess was comparable to a return-to-void stage mighty figure, and it was responsible for hunting down return-to-void stage mighty figures. After all, return-to-void stage mighty figures could unleash large-scale spell techniques that were extremely lethal. The black-furred snow ghost beast's claws burned with dark green flames. These flames were imbued with an unimaginably lethal poison, and once the claws pierced into its opponent's body, they would be paralyzed by the poisonous flames before being incinerated into ashes. It had used this technique to kill a return-to-void stage mighty figure from the 4-9 Immortal sect with the help of another black-furred snow ghost beast. It would be a wonderful thing to see this extremely beautiful woman wail in agony as she perished from the poisonous flames. With this in mind, a sinister smile appeared on the black-furred snow ghost beast's face. The black-furred snow ghost beast was extremely fast. However, when it was 10 miles away from the woman, it suddenly felt that its movements had slowed down. Furthermore, it was getting slower and slower. What was going on? The black-furred snow ghost beast looked at the woman approaching it. The woman held the great ice sword in her hand, and she didn't slow down in the slightest. At this moment, it inexplicably surged with infinite fear. The poisonous flames that it had always been proud of were also frozen into unflammable ice cubes in this strange domain. No! Whoosh! The blade flashed. The black-furred snow ghost beast's body was sliced in half, and its life force was severed. It couldn't even launch an attack before it was instantly killed. This female sword immortal was none other than Lu Qianhuan. She was only at the return-to-void intermediate stage, but she possessed the power to kill Dao integration initial stage mighty figures. Now that he was at the return-to-void pinnacle stage, it was a piece of cake for him to deal with a black-furred snow ghost beast. She didn't stop after killing one of the snow ghostly beasts. She stepped lightly in the air and charged toward the other snow ghostly beast with her sword in hand in an extremely lithe and graceful manner. At this moment, she was a peerless female sword immortal who could kill anything in her way. She was a death god who brought nightmares to her enemies' top-notch combat strength. She was going to take care of the powerful snow ghostly beasts. She was going to kill all enemies that wanted to threaten the safety of the Starfire battleship. As for the dense army of snow ghostly beasts, she was going to leave them to Xianyuan Cheng. Aside from Lu Qianhuan, Yi Ling, Cassidy, Tobias, Long Outian, and the others were also nightmares for the black-furred snow ghostly beasts. They were not returned to void stage mighty figures at all. None of the powerful snow ghostly beasts were able to break through their defenses. The return-to-void stage black-furred snow ghostly beasts were unable to break through their defenses, so they could only pin their hopes on the 50 million-strong army of snow ghostly beasts. No matter how powerful they were, they would eventually tire out. It was a good idea to exhaust them to death with their invincible numbers. The bombardment from the Starfire battleship became less and less concentrated, and the speed at which the snow ghostly beasts advanced increased significantly. White shadows surged like waves as they rapidly approached the main peaks. Quick, let's attack in one go. Their battleship is out of ammunition. Roar. Tear them apart. Tear the battleship apart. The snow ghostly beasts had had enough of the relentless bombardment from the battleship. They couldn't even get close to the main peak of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect. Now that the bombardment had weakened, they were not going to give up on this rare opportunity. The snow ghostly beasts became even more ferocious and bloodthirsty as they charged forward. Soon, close to 1,000 more 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect disciples fell in battle. A dozen or so soul formation stage elites from the 4-9 Immortal sect had also perished. All of them were unable to defend against the terrifying numbers of the snow ghostly beasts. However, this did not deter the other soul formation stage cultivators, and they continued to fight on the front lines. Charge! Avenge our brothers! Ha ha ha! I've already killed 1,000 beasts, and that's more than enough. I can die with no regrets now that I can fight alongside all of you. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted. Just as he was about to be engulfed by the beast tide, the man chose to self-detonate. The explosion blasted several hundred snow ghostly beasts into pieces. Brother Wang Yu! Damn it! The 4-9 immortal sect disciples gritted their teeth and fought with all their might. Their bodies were riddled with wounds of all sizes, but in the face of the despairing army of snow ghostly beasts, they took the initiative to fight against the beast tide and fight with all their might. They were like pillars of indomitable spirit that stood above the waves. There are countless civilians behind us, hold on. We have to hold on. I haven't even tasted sect leader and Lin's cooking yet, I have to hold on. I have no regrets in entering the 4-9 immortal sect. It's my honor to fight alongside all of you. I'll be taking my leave now, no. Boom, 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 they self-detonated again and again, dying in battle until the very last moment. This was an earth-shattering battle, and anyone could be the next victim. Xiao Zhe, Dongfang Zhuangshi, and the other Dao integration stage super mighty figures were being held back by the three heavenly gods. There were many black-furred snow ghostly beasts, and there was an endless stream of normal snow ghostly beasts. They were at a huge disadvantage regardless of whether it was in terms of quantity or quality. In reality, all of the 4-9 immortal sect disciples knew that this was probably the last battle of their lives. Even so, they still wielded their weapons and fought until the very last moment. If their weapons were bent, they could use their fist. If their vital energy was depleted, they could sacrifice their blood. If worse came to worst, they could ignite their cultivation bases and self-detonate. There are 50 great Daos and 49 heavenly evolutions. Every disciple of the 4-9 immortal sect would remember these words. No matter what dire straits they were in, no matter how hopeless the situation was, they would always harbor hope in their hearts. They knew that as long as they persevered, a miracle would happen, and there would always be a chance for change. This was the belief of every single member of the 4-9 immortal sect. Chapter 2073. The members of the 4-9 immortal sect fought with ferocity. However, all of their efforts were unable to hold back the endless beast tide. Night gradually fell, and the dense pack of white snow ghost beasts appeared even more eye-catching. Their crimson claws also became even more dangerous and brutal. Cassidy was surrounded by 6 black-furred snow ghostly beasts. One of the snow ghostly beasts took advantage of an opening and chopped off one of her arms. Another snow ghostly beast charged forward and plunged its crimson claws into Cassidy's lower abdomen, trying to slice her in half. It was also at this moment that a crimson light suddenly erupted from the blood that had splattered through the air. A smile as vibrant as a crimson rose appeared on Cassidy's exquisitely beautiful face. Blood sacrifice. Divine ghost-slaying blade. Her blood materialized into countless sharp blade projections, and the 2 black-furred snow ghost beasts were sliced in half before they had a chance to react. Cassidy's severed arm turned into blood and fused into her wound before condensing back into a long, white arm. However, the sleeve was gone. She licked her lips and turned to look at the other 4 black-furred snow ghostly beasts. Her eyes were filled with danger and madness. There were simply too many enemies. She could only use this method of exchanging injuries for deaths to quickly eliminate the enemies. Aside from her, Tobias and Merlin were also doing the same thing, and it could be said that they were fighting with all their might. The most dazzling members of the Blood Tribe were Ada, Jean Ling, Jean Yao, and the Triplet. They could unleash Dao integration stage combat prowess through a special spell formation that linked their bloodlines together, thereby making them invincible on the battlefield. The only flaw was that they didn't possess any large-scale spell technique. They were still struggling to keep up with the onslaught of snow ghost beasts. Boom boom. Another 2 earth-shattering booms erupted. The anguished wails of true dragons followed. 2 black dragons were crushed into the ground by a golden-furred snow soul beast. boundless power of frost imbued with the paramount power of laws threatened to completely seal their bodies in ice. The two black dragons were none other than Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tuesday. They were taking advantage of the fact that they had a lot of health points to take the beating. The golden-furred soul beast was extremely strong, but there was nothing it could do against these two soul beasts. It couldn't do anything to them. After a while, the golden-furred soul beast finally thought of a way to seal the soul beasts in ice. It planned to completely freeze these two troublesome true dragons in this place. Even two Dao integration stage super mighty figures had been subdued. Darkness enshrouded the entire 10,000 spirits immortal sect, as well as the hearts of all the 4-9 immortal sect members. Darkness descended, and this battle had come to an end. Everything was coming to an end. All of them were going to be buried in the darkness and buried under a blanket of snow and wind. The snow ghost beasts' attacks became more and more ferocious. The frequency of the Starfire battleship's cannons grew slower and slower, and it could only desperately absorb the power of the stars before continuing to fire. It was clear that its internal energy had been exhausted. Even the 4-9 immortal sect members were feeling an indescribable sense of exhaustion after battling for such a long time, and they were only able to hold on through sheer faith. Qing Yingxiong wielded his massive sword and pulverized a dozen or so snow ghost beasts before him. However, a few more snow ghost beasts pounced toward him, and he tried to swing his sword to defend himself, only to find that his body had already reached its limit. He was unable to move at all, and his body was punctured by the claws of a few snow ghost beasts, upon which blood splattered through the air. His vision gradually became blurry. So dark, Qing Yingxiong looked up into the sky to find that night had already enshrouded the entire heaven and earth. There were no stars, no moon, and only heavy snow and dark clouds obscured everything, but all of a sudden, a dazzling ray of light pierced his eyes, causing his blurry consciousness to become clear for a moment. What kind of light is this? Holy F***ck, I'm going blind. Qing Yingxiong shuddered, and he slashed at the snow ghost beasts beside him before looking up into the sky. His disgruntled expression gradually congealed on his face. His eyes widened and his mouth gaped open, as if he had seen something extremely astonishing. In the sky above, an extremely dazzling golden light erupted from the Starfire battleship. At the same time, a yin and yang fish slowly revolved beneath the battleship, exuding an extremely powerful true intent of the Tai Chi. The Starfire battleship has become the Tai Chi battleship? Countless disciples were astonished by the scenes unfolding before their eyes. This aura. It's the aura of Pavilion Lord Xian Yuan. That's right, that's Prince Charming Xian Yuan. Some of the fangirls were already letting loose cries of surprise, and they became even more ferocious. Is he piloting this battleship? Isn't the battleship out of missiles? Also, why is it him? Everyone was quite confused. However, something truly astonishing then occurred. The Starfire battleship's cannons suddenly doubled in frequency, and a series of devastating mushroom clouds rose into the air as the missiles struck the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The heavens trembled and the earth crumbled. Destructive energy crashed into the surrounding snow ghost beasts, and many of them were blasted to death. The battleship has suddenly become more powerful? This is great. We'll be able to turn the tables now. Long live Pavilion Lord Xian Yuan. The 4-9 Immortal Sect disciples didn't know how the Starfire battleship was able to fire its cannons, but they knew that this definitely had something to do with Xian Yuan Qing, and all of them began to yell with excitement. The firepower of the Starfire battleship became more ferocious once again, and the booming sounds did not stop. Destructive mushroom clouds exploded on the ground, which was filled with snow ghost beasts, forming a destructive front line, and greatly reducing the number of snow ghost beasts that charged into the battlefield. The 4-9 Immortal Sect disciples were finally able to catch their breath. This was the right rhythm. The Starfire battleship was suppressing the snow ghost beast army, and they were taking care of the remaining snow ghost beasts. The Starfire battleship was the main reason why they were able to hold off the army of snow ghost beasts for so long. This was evident from the dire situation the 4-9 Immortal Sect disciples were in after the Starfire battleship ran out of power. Thankfully, the Starfire battleship had been resurrected, and they saw hope again. To them, the Starfire battleship was the sun. The Starfire battleship hovered in the sky, exuding a dazzling golden yang-type power that chased away the frosty aura of the entire battlefield. Bombers had their own heartwarming ways. Not to mention Big Brother Ching was such a handsome bomber. The 4-9 Immortal Sect's front line was finally stabilized, but the battle was still ongoing. Within the Starfire battleship, Xianyuan Qing used his own Dao to connect with the Starfire battleship, thereby drawing upon the power of the myriad spirit Tai Chi between heaven and earth to attack the snow ghost beast. This allowed Xianyuan Qing to unleash his full power. Rather than saying that the Starfire battleship was firing its cannons, it was more accurate to say that Xianyuan Qing was the one firing the cannons. However, this type of attack actually had very severe side effects. Aside from overexerting his own energy, it would also severely damage his Dao. In the best-case scenario, he would be unable to progress any further in his cultivation base. In the worst-case scenario, he would lose all of his cultivation base and even his life. Xianyuan Qing was well aware of this. In reality, he was the one who had invented this trump card, so he had already made up his mind as he walked toward the Starfire battleship. If I can win this battle by sacrificing myself, then in Enlin's words, it would be a huge win. Within the cockpit, a smile appeared on Xianyuan Qing's handsome face. Now, let me put on a spectacular show of explosions. Chapter 2074. At the bottom of the Starfire battleship, the Tai Chi Yin-Yang twin fish formation shone brightly. Every time the pitch-black cannon fired, the great formation would add a great power of heaven and earth to the golden ball of energy, making it even more terrifying. When it landed on the target area, it would explode into destructive energy. The light from the explosions lit up the 10,000 spirits Immortal Sect as if it were daytime. The snow ghost beasts that were like a tidal wave were once again dominated by the fear of carpet bombing. Some of them were burned to death by the extreme heat, while others were killed by the shockwaves of the explosions. However, after being suppressed by the Starfire battleship's firepower, not only did they not weaken, but they became even more frenzied. Even though the energy of the explosion in front of them had not completely dissipated, they still charged forward without hesitation. Tear apart all the humans in one go! Roar! Kill, kill, kill! The snow ghost beast's eyes were scarlet, and its face was filled with malevolence and bloodlust. It seemed to have sensed the Starfire battleship's limit, and its attacks became even more ferocious and frightening. The 4-9 Immortal Sect members didn't even have a chance to catch their breath before the pressure bore down on them again. The strategy of these snow ghost beasts was very simple. They were going to overwhelm their enemies with sheer numbers. Inside the Starfire battleship, Xianyuan Qing gritted his teeth as the muscles in his body trembled non-stop. His strength and true intents of Dao techniques surged into the Starfire battleship like a tidal wave. Through the Starfire battleship's field of vision, he could see his comrades from the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect and the 4-9 Immortal Sect falling one after another, and he was enraged by these scenes. Stronger, I want to be stronger. The power within his body was being supplied in a frenzy, and his will of the great path was being activated in a frenzy. The myriad spirit Tai Chi was able to absorb the energy of all living things in the world. Furthermore, it focused more on the Yang attribute, so it could unleash explosive power in battle. Everything has a spirit, everything can explode. In the sky, around the Starfire battleship, a series of golden warheads suddenly appeared out of thin air. There were hundreds of them densely packed together. Myriad spirits Tai Chi, solar rain. The warheads fell to the ground like a golden meteor shower. Then, they exploded on the ground where the snow phantom beasts were densely scattered. The terrifying energy released by each of the golden warheads could blow everything within a radius of tens of thousands of meters into smithereens. Boom, 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 boom. The explosions did not stop. Hundreds of small suns rose from the ground, illuminating everything. The earth was shaking, and the snow ghost beast was howling in pain. It was another extravagant, explosive feast. After the cannon fire subsided, the 4-9 Immortal Sect members did a rough estimation, and they were astonished to discover that over 3 million snow ghost beasts had perished in the explosion. What kind of terrifying lethality was this? Pavilion Master Xuanyuan's explosion is really terrifying. Long live Prince Charming Xuanyuan. So awesome, I love my male god to death. For a moment, Xuanyuan Cheng and his golden battleship became the center of attention. Chi. A few silver lines flashed through the air. A black-furred snow ghost beast that attempted to ambush the Starfire battleship was sliced into tens of thousands of pieces by Bai Ling's spatial threads, and it didn't even get a chance to cry out before it died. Bai Ling stood at the tip of the Starfire battleship as the final defensive barrier. Unlike the others, her eyes were filled with worry and regret as she looked at the Starfire warship. Why do you have to work so hard? Can't you control yourself a little? Actually, we can lower the firepower a little more. We can still hold on. Bai Ling clenched her fists, and she was struck by a sense of powerlessness for the first time. If she had been a little more powerful and accumulated a little more power, Xuanyuan Cheng wouldn't have had to sacrifice himself. The Starfire battleship's cannon fire was already extremely powerful. The number of snow ghost beasts had also dwindled to around 40 million. However, the ferocious nature of the snow ghost beasts had also been awakened, and they charged into the blast zone with even more fearless ferocity before pouncing on the human cultivators around them. The 4-9 Immortal Sect and the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect were still suffering casualties, but they were still able to hold on due to the bombardment from the Starfire battleship. Hold on. We'll be the ones to win in the end. The cultivators fought with all their might, and the light emanating from the Starfire battleship became brighter and brighter, as if it were a sun hanging in the sky. The yin-yang diagram had also expanded to several hundred kilometers, reaching an extremely ridiculous size. Bai Ling seemed to have detected something, and she immediately turned around with her eyes wide open. Xuanyuan Cheng, what are you doing? Stop right now! Within the core cockpit. It's not enough, I can still do more, Xuanyuan Cheng murmured to himself as a scorching aura radiated from his body. The energy within his body was being sucked away at a rapid rate, and both his cultivation base and life force fluctuations were extremely feeble due to overexertion. However, his eyes were extremely bright. As long as I kill more enemies, we'll have fewer casualties, and I'll be able to kill more. Xuanyuan Cheng clenched his fists tightly as countless golden veined patterns spread over his body, instantly covering his entire body. The energy fluctuations emanating from the Starfire battleship became even more powerful, and the golden light emanating from it became even more dazzling. A scorching aura proliferated outward as terrifying heat waves surged through the air. This battleship didn't look like the Starfire battleship at all, it looked like a solar battleship. All of the exhausted disciples looked up at the dazzling battleship in the sky, and an indescribable sense of security welled up in their hearts. This light was so warm, and there was an indescribable sense of warmth within its domineering aura, they had no more energy left to fight, and they were about to die. However, their friends still had a chance to survive. They still had a chance to win this battle, and they still had a chance to protect the Kingdom of the Nine States. That was enough. However, they soon noticed something unusual. They discovered that the Starfire battleship in the sky was becoming brighter and brighter. It was already very dazzling, but it continued to grow brighter as if there was no end to it. What's going on? The Starfire battleship is shining like a sun? It won't explode, right? Just as all of the cultivators were feeling confused, a familiar voice traveled over. Let the 4 sons of 9 protect the kingdom of the 9 states forever. The Starfire battleship's light finally reached its peak. Under the night sky, the golden light overshadowed all other colors, and it was as if the boundless sun was illuminating heaven and earth. At this instant, the fur of the bloodthirsty snow ghost beasts that were charging toward them suddenly became extremely bright, as if some kind of energy was about to explode. Roar! The snow ghost beasts also looked at their fur in confusion. Boom, 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 boom. A series of explosions suddenly erupted. One snow ghost beast after another began to explode on the spot. Flames and flesh flew everywhere, and anguished howls instantly reverberated throughout heaven and earth. All of the cultivators were dumbstruck by the sight of the snow ghost beasts exploding on the spot. There was an extremely large number of snow ghost beasts exploding, and their snowy white fur suddenly glowed brightly before exploding on the spot. Hundreds of thousands, millions, millions, tens of millions, the vast expanse of land under the night sky transformed into a boundless sea of golden light. This was a spectacular sight formed by the self-detonation of the snow ghost beasts, and it was an unforgettable sight for all of the cultivators present. For some reason, almost everyone turned their eyes toward the battleship in the sky. The golden light from the battleship shone upon the snow ghost beasts, upon which the snow ghost beasts exploded. Could a return to void stage cultivator really unleash such a terrifying technique? The Tao of myriad spirit Tai Chi is able to establish a connection with living beings in the outside world, and Xianyuan Cheng's Tao of explosion is able to utilize the power of every single particle to the extreme. That's why he was able to envelop so many living beings with his spell technique and cause their bodies to completely explode on the particle level. Bai Ling murmured to herself as she looked at the scenes unfolding before her eyes. This was an extremely precise attack. It was a destructive attack that targeted all of the snow ghost beasts. The difficulty of such an attack was not something that a normal mighty figure could imagine. Bai Ling was well aware of the price that had to be paid in order to achieve such a devastating attack. The golden light had already become the only color between heaven and earth. The explosion of the snow ghost beasts was the accompaniment to this golden light. The explosion of the golden energy was extremely beautiful under the night sky. Especially from a bird's eye view, it looked like a golden carpet of blooming golden flowers that extended into the distance with no end in sight. The snow ghost beasts howled in anguish as they fled in terror. They unleashed spell techniques to defend themselves, but they were unable to escape the fate of exploding on the spot. Their fate was sealed the moment they came into contact with the golden light. The explosions lasted for only a minute before coming to an end. The cultivators of the 4-9 Immortal Sect and the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect stared blankly at the scorched earth before them. There were no corpses strewn all over the ground. Most of the corpses had already been reduced to charcoal. The battlefield was extremely quiet, and only the sizzling sound of barbecuing could be heard. The 40 million-strong army of snow ghost beasts had been completely annihilated in this one explosion. Chapter 2075. At the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect, the battlefield, which had been filled with shouts of killing, had fallen into a strange silence. After an unimaginable explosion, there were either dead snow ghost beasts or cultivators and enemies on the battlefield who had been too shocked to even speak. Xianyuan Qing had put on a spectacular show for the Kingdom of the 9 States, which had almost wiped out all of the enemies and stunned all of his allies. The Starfire battleship's cannon blasts had only alleviated some of the pressure on them, but they were still suffering casualties. The enemies were still charging toward them, and they weren't sure if they would be able to hold on. But now all of the snow ghost beasts had self-detonated, and not even the enemies were left. Xianyuan Qing was able to unleash such a terrifying attack with the Starfire battleship? There were only a little over 1,000 snow ghost beasts left on the battlefield. Out of the tens of millions of snow ghost beasts, only a little over 1,000 remained. All of them were black-furred snow ghost beasts, as well as extremely powerful white-furred snow ghost beasts, and all of them had sustained different types of injuries. The ferocious and bloodthirsty snow ghost beasts were now as silent as chickens, completely dumbstruck by the explosion. What was going on? An army of tens of millions of snow ghost beasts had been wiped out just like that? What kind of joke was this? Bai Ling was also extremely astonished, but she could just barely make sense of what had just happened. The Starfire battleship was a masterpiece of Purple Star technology, and its destructive power was comparable to that of a super mighty figure at the Dao integration pinnacle stage. Furthermore, Xianyuan Cheng's power and Dao realm were extremely compatible with the Starfire battleship, thereby allowing the Starfire battleship to unleash unimaginable power. However, the price they had to pay to unleash this attack was definitely unimaginably high. Not only Bai Ling, but most of the cultivators present had also sensed something. The Starfire battleship, which had once been as dazzling as the sun, quickly dimmed as it hovered in midair. Xu Honglan rose into the air and charged toward the Starfire battleship with all her might. No. You'll be fine. She rushed into the core cockpit, and her eyes widened at the sight of the man in the transparent cockpit. Her mind had gone completely blank. The cockpit slowly opened. Xianyuan Cheng limped over to Xu Honglan with difficulty before wiping away the tears on the gorgeous woman's face. Why are you crying? I'm still alive, right? But wah. Xu Honglan couldn't help but burst into tears as she hugged the shriveled, white-haired man who had lost all of his cultivation base. At this moment, Lu Qinhuan, Su Qinyun, Tang Shimen, and the others also rushed over. Xianyuan Cheng was also rooted to the spot as tears welled up in his eyes. Su Qinyun bit her pink lips, tears welling up in her eyes. Her impression of Xianyuan Cheng was that he was a tall, handsome, gentle, and considerate genius who was respected by others. He had unlimited potential and a bright future ahead of him, but now, why did such a beautiful person become an old man who had lost all his cultivation? Cough, cough, cough. Xianyuan Cheng coughed violently and then spat out a mouthful of blood. Everyone hurriedly surrounded him and unleashed healing spell techniques upon him. What are you all doing? Hurry up and fight. Aren't there more enemies? Don't worry about me. Really don't worry about me. Xianyuan Cheng was enraged by the sight of Su Qinyun, Tang Shimen, and the others healing him. Don't waste so much energy on an old man like me. But you. Su Qinyun sobbed. You don't know how powerful you are if you don't push yourself a little. I was able to sacrifice myself to save tens of millions of enemies, and that has already far exceeded my expectations. I'm already extremely happy and content. I have no regrets in this life, but you all still have things to do, so hurry up and go. Xianyuan Cheng's voice was extremely feeble, but it was also extremely gentle and calm. Everyone fell silent. Some were grieving, while others were hating their own powerlessness. Lu Qianhuan had already charged out of the Starfire battleship with killing intent surging from her body. I'm going to cut down all of these B***stars. Boom, 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 another battle erupted. This time, it was the 4-9 Immortal Sect and 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect's turn to retaliate. The entire army of snow ghost beasts had been wiped out, and the snow ghost beasts' advantage in numbers had been completely nullified. Over 1,000 snow ghost beasts had to face the boundless wrath of the two great sects. Lu Qianhuan, Su Qinyun, Tang Shimen, Sun Yulua, Tobias, the white-scaled wolf god, Dabai. All of the Return to Void stage mighty figures pounced on the black-furred snow ghost beasts in a frenzy. This was the final battle, and it was a battle where they were going all out. Xu Honglan carried Xianyuan Cheng to the front of the Starfire battleship to survey the entire battlefield. Xianyuan Cheng said that he wanted to see the final victory of the 4-9 Immortal Sect and the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect. He wanted to see his sect protect the kingdom of the 9 states with his own eyes. Xu Honglan and Xianyuan Qing made their way to the front of the battleship to witness the final moment together. All of the 4-9 Immortal Sect and 10,000 Spirits, Immortal Sect disciples and elders faltered slightly upon seeing Xianyuan Qing on the Starfire battleship before attacking the snow ghost beasts with even more ferocity. Far too many people had died on this battlefield, and they didn't even have time to grieve. All they could do was vent all of their emotions on the snow ghost beasts before them. Xianyuan Qing had single-handedly turned the tables on the entire battlefield and completed an unprecedented feat. They weren't going to let his hard work and sacrifice go to waste. They were going to kill all of these snow ghost beasts no matter what. Energy exploded and spell techniques exploded. One powerful immortal spell after another shook heaven and earth. The snow ghost beasts were surrounded by all of the mighty figures, and they fell one after another. As time passed, regardless of whether it was the powerful white or black-furred snow ghost beasts, all of them would be slain by the combined forces of the 4-9 Immortal Sect and the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect. The only uncertain factor on the battlefield was the 3 golden snow ghost beasts with divine halos. They still held the upper hand. Xiao Tu and Xiao Zhe were still pinned to the ground, and half of their bodies had already been sealed in ice. The demonic blood Kirin and Phoenix Little Huang joined forces to battle a golden snow ghost beast. Red flames and golden snowflakes clashed in the air, as if it were an epic clash of ice and fire. However, the golden storm of extreme frost was imbued with extremely peculiar laws of ice, and it was also able to completely suppress the 2 mythological beasts. Shangguan Yi and the Great Empress of the Snow Tribe had joined forces to battle the snow ghost beasts. Both of them loved to play with snow, but the 2 beauties were being pummeled by the snow ghost beasts to the point where they were starting to doubt their own lives. The situation on a Dao integration stage battlefield was quite grim. Even though Xianyuan Qing had 1 foot in the grave, he was still very nervous as he watched their battle. His murky eyes stared intently at the battle taking place in the distance. Due to the fact that he had lost his cultivation base, he could only watch as the explosions took place and was completely unable to capture their movements. However, the explosions were enough for him. Chapter 2076. Xianyuan Qing looked down at the cultivators fighting for their lives with a blank expression. Some of these people were his classmates, some were his companions who had gone through fire and water with him, and some were his fellow disciples who had sat and discussed the Tao with him. Everything made him reluctant to part with them. There were also Enlin and Su Xiaolan in Yutong City. It was a pity that he wouldn't be able to see them one last time. Xianyuan Qing heaved a faint sigh. He was quite reluctant to part with them, but he was quite calm. Xu Honglan looped her arms around Xianyuan Qing's neck and rested her head on Xianyuan Qing's shoulder as she said in a pleasant voice, "Ah Qing, I like you." Xianyuan Qing faltered slightly upon hearing this. How many times had she confessed to him already? He recalled that he had always tried to bluff his way through without giving her a proper response. He looked at the red-clothed dancer beside him, whose face was like a beautiful flower reflecting the water and whose body was like a weak willow in the wind. Her beautiful eyes contained unprecedented firmness and passion. Xianyuan Qing smiled. "I like you too." In that instant, all the sounds between heaven and earth seemed to have fallen silent. Xu Honglan looked at the elderly man before her, and she could vaguely see his handsome features from the past. She smiled as well. After confessing for so long, she had finally heard the answer that she had been yearning for. However, she wasn't as excited or elated as she had imagined. Perhaps it was because she had already known the answer. She had only confirmed it now. Xu Honglan pecked Xianyuan Qing on the cheek with a blush on her face. "Are you only willing to admit it because you don't have long to live?" Xianyuan Qing thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. "No. Actually, if you confess to me again, I'll admit it no matter what state I'm in." Shu Honglan's mouth gaped open upon hearing this, and tears began to flow from her eyes. This was undoubtedly a massive blow to her. How could fate make a fool out of her like this? Honglan, you have to live well, Xian Yuanqing said. Don't worry, of course I'll live well. I won't do something as stupid as committing suicide for love. A rare look of determination appeared on Shu Honglan's face, and she said in a low voice, It's just that. I won't be dancing anymore. There's no point in dancing without you watching over me. She could sense that Xian Yuanqing's life force was rapidly and irreversibly fading away. Bai Ling had already tried everything she could think of, but she was still unable to save Xian Yuanqing. It would be a lie to say that Xian Yuanqing wasn't feeling any regret, but he was still very pleased to see that his sacrifice had created such a good opportunity for his friends and the Kingdom of the Nine States to retaliate. Just let him age quickly and then slowly die. He found himself very, very tired. He couldn't even feel the warmth from the woman's hand. Am I going to die, Pooh? Xian Yuanqing suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. His entire body shuddered, as if he had been electrocuted, and his consciousness suddenly became a lot clearer. Even his soul, which was about to leave his body, returned to his body in fright. Then, he saw a bright red flower. It was using its dark green branches to pierce into his heart, swaying its graceful body. Xiao Hong! Xian Yuanqing exclaimed in shock. Elder Xiao Hong? Shu Honglan was also given a fright as she held Xian Yuanqing in her arms. She had no idea when the little red flower had appeared in Xian Yuanqing's body. A sweet voice sounded. Sigh. What's going on between you two? I finally saved your father, but you look like you're about to die. What an exhausting flower. Xiao Hong grumbled in her sweet voice. If I want to save you, I'll have to bask in the sun for a long time before I can catch my breath. Xian Yuanqing and Shu Honglan were both rooted to the spot upon hearing this. Save me? Xian Yuanqing murmured to himself as his soul returned to his body again. Shu Honglan's eyes widened with ecstasy as she spoke in a trembling voice. Xiao Hong. Why, you can save Ah Qing? Really? Can you really save him? I can, but you're more difficult to save than your father. I can only save your lifespan and cultivation base, but your Tao has been severely damaged, so I can't do anything for now, Xiao Hong replied with a forlorn expression. Xian Yuanqing and Shu Honglan were both astonished. Not only could it save his life, but it could also save his lifespan and cultivation base? Was this supposed to be a forlorn expression? Xian Yuanqing and Shu Honglan were about to cry tears of joy. Who would want to die if they had a chance to live? They had thought that they would be thanking the heavens if they could survive, but now even their lifespan and cultivation base could be saved. If they weren't hallucinating, then they were definitely in heaven. Shu Honglan's body trembled as she thanked Enlin over and over again. Xian Yuanqing was expressing his gratitude, but he still kept asking if there were any side effects to Xiao Hong and whether it would be harmful to Xiao Hong. He really wanted to live, but he couldn't bring himself to sacrifice someone else's life for the sake of survival. Xiao Hong promised that this process was very taxing and tiring, but there would be no side effects. All he needed to do was bask in the sun to recover. Thus, the treatment began. The faint golden light fused into Xian Yuanqing's body, and as if it were a miracle, Xian Yuanqing's shriveled skin regained its luster and elasticity, and his white hair became black again. Not only that, but his cultivation base was also recovering at an extremely slow rate. To Xian Yuanqing and Shu Honglan, this was nothing short of a miracle. They couldn't understand what Xiao Hong was doing. It was so profound that they could only use the words holy F***ck and bad *SS to describe it. There was only one thought in their minds. How could she be so bad *SS? Even the knowledgeable Bai Ling was rooted to the spot, let alone Xian Yuanqing and Shu Honglan. What Little Red was doing right now had touched upon the blind spot of her knowledge. In the past, Xianyuan Cheng's life force and cultivation base were like a candle that was constantly burning. In the end, he had already reached a point where there was nothing left to burn, and everything was reduced to light, heat, and matter that flowed into heaven and earth. Bai Ling could only gather the gas and matter released by the candle again. However, Xiao Hong was even able to recover the light and heat released by the candle. This was not something that a Dao integration stage supermighty figure could achieve. Just what else was Xiao Hong hiding? Bai Ling was starting to get curious. She discovered that Xiao Hong's journey had been very strange and inexplicable. She cultivated, she made breakthroughs, her aptitude defied the natural order. And now, even her abilities were extremely strange. After a short while, a faint smile appeared on Bai Ling's face as she shook her head. The 4-9 Immortal sect had no shortage of strange things. Setting aside Enlin and Su Xiaolan, even Tina, Yi Ling, and Shuizhantian were all very strange. If she really wanted to get to the bottom of everything, wouldn't she die of exhaustion? Come to think of it, she was also quite strange herself. Bai Ling looked at Xianyuan Cheng, who was becoming more and more energetic, as well as Xu Honglan, who was crying tears of joy in her arms, and a warm and enticing smile appeared on her face. 4-9 Immortal Sect, what a strange and interesting place. Chapter 2077. In the eastern region of the Tai Chu continent. Within Chen Shi City. Streaks of pure white heavenly power crashed into the ground, blasting a series of massive craters into the ground. Countless powerful beings of the Kingdom of the Nine States United Army were reduced to nothingness. After suffering over 10 million casualties, the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army finally reached the city. The number 1 spell formation protecting Chen Shi City had already been riddled with holes by the Heavenly Human Tribe cultivators, and it was on the verge of collapse. The Celestial Dharch wore a white imperial robe with golden patterns, and he stood at the forefront of the formation. His boundless aura surged like a tsunami, intimidating the 80 million strong army before him. There were 5 heavenly gods standing before him, all of whom were exuding boundless might. However, the Celestial Dharch was still very calm and collected. The Celestial Dharch was a seasoned veteran, so he could handle this situation. Thinking back to the time when 9 heavenly gods had suddenly appeared on the eastern front, his legs had almost given out from fear. Fortunately, the 4 heavenly gods under the light banner had rushed over to the Purple Star ruins as soon as the heaven-shattering pillar of light was activated. Only the 5 heavenly gods under the Supreme Sky banner remained on the battlefield. Heavenly God Eternal, Heavenly God Karma, Heavenly God Space, Heavenly God Black Mist, and Heavenly God Dong Long. This was an extremely fearsome lineup, but the Celestial Dharch felt like he could still hold on the eastern front. After all, he wasn't the only one who could oppose a heavenly god. Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake combined could oppose a heavenly god, and the only Dao integration stage true dragon of the Dragon Court of the Eastern Seas, Ao Xiaowu, could also just barely hold off a heavenly god. There were only 3 heavenly gods left, and the Celestial Dharch felt like he could handle them. That's right, he was a bad *SS who had immediately become a heavenly disciple after betraying his sect. His understanding of heaven-crushing true intent had reached an unfathomable level, and with the power of the heaven-crushing formation, fighting 1 heavenly god would be extremely difficult. Fighting 3 heavenly gods was a bit of a stretch, but it wasn't impossible. The Celestial Dharch had already unleashed his paramount heaven-crushing true intent, and it was exactly because of this that the heavenly gods didn't charge in at once. Instead, they chose to wait and see. Dawn City's great formation is about to be breached. Let's attack now. The enemies in front of us are like chickens and dogs to us. The youth with 2 dark green spikes hanging from his waist said with a smile. His eyes were filled with arrogance and disdain. We can't. The enemies before us look very weak, but they definitely have a lot of trump cards up their sleeves. We're still in danger of losing. I suggest we wait and see and force the enemies to reveal their trump cards first. The silver-haired girl with a golden tortoise shell on her back said calmly. The two in front of him were Divine Heaven Stage Heavenly Humans, Heavenly God Dong Long and Heavenly God Black Mist. Why are you still so cowardly? Don't you think being a coward is a disgrace to Empyrean gods? Empyrean God Eastlong pursed his lips. What do you know? This is called, if the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. If the enemy moves, I'll move. I can come and go as I please, and I can see the situation clearly. I have a firm grasp of the battlefield. Empyrean God Blackmist's head was half retracted into his golden turtle shell. He stared at the city walls of the Kingdom of Dawn with his dead fish eyes and spoke in an extremely calm and unhurried voice. Empyrean God Dong Long snorted disdainfully upon hearing this. He turned to stare at the celestial arch on the city wall and grinned. Then you can continue hiding here. I'm going up. Right at this moment, a tall and handsome man with long, black hair stepped forward and stood in front of Empyrean God Dong Long. Wait a little longer. Empyrean God Dong Long's arrogant expression finally receded slightly upon seeing the man before him. The heavenly space god was the leader of the group of heavenly gods. When there was a disagreement, this black-haired man had the greatest authority to make the final decision. Black Mist's idea is actually quite good. We just need to intimidate those top-tier powerful beings here. As for the rest of the Human Tribe United Army, the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army that we've sent out is more than enough to crush them. The Heavenly Space God wasn't afraid of the enemies before them. However, the situation before them wasn't worthy of their attention. It wasn't wise to unleash 5 trump cards right from the start. They had to see what the enemy was going to do first, then crush them one step at a time. They had to strike the enemy into despair before killing them. That was the correct strategy. The Heavenly Space God enjoyed this process very much. Empyrean God Dong Long repressed his urge to attack and glanced at his comrades beside him. A young girl was huddled in her golden turtle shell, staring blankly at the city wall in the distance. There was also a chubby child who was stuffing food into his mouth. His eyes were constantly glancing up at the sky, as if he was completely unconcerned about the battle taking place in front of him. The last one was even worse. Not only was he not talking, but he was also not moving. He was a peaceful-looking statue with his hands maintaining a strange hand seal. There was a benevolent expression on his face. The statue hovered motionlessly in the air. If it weren't for the crimson divine halo above his head, one would really think that this was just an ordinary statue. Black Mist, Karma, Eternity. Each of his comrades was weirder than the last. Dong Long collected his thoughts and turned his gaze to the Sky Emperor standing proudly at the top of the city wall. He said disdainfully, "That lowly human really got off easy. Look at his arrogant appearance. He really thinks he's somebody. Does he really think he can block our attack by himself?" This was a false accusation against the Celestial Arch. The Celestial Arch merely wanted to strike an ordinary pose. He wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could stop all of the heavenly gods on his own. He just wanted to stop 3 of them. The battle on the battlefield became more and more intense. The battle between the Kingdom of the 9 States United Army and the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had reached a climax. Countless living beings were dying every second, and this was the first time the Celestial Arch had witnessed such an intense battle. All types of powerful spell techniques were unleashed upon the world under the night sky, bathing heaven and earth in vibrant colors. All types of enlightened beings were summoned, projections of massive beasts appeared between heaven and earth, and a series of extremely powerful spell techniques were unleashed. This was truly a dreamlike scene that shook the mind. However, behind this dreamy and shocking battlefield was an endless amount of blood and death. Anyone, including Dao Integration Stage super mighty figures, could perish on this battlefield. The Celestial Arch turned toward his 7 precious daughters. Tian Shou, Tian Yang, Tian Rong, Tian Chang, Tian Xian, Tian Qing, and Tian Yu. All of them had reached return to void stage celestial immortal, and they were the main force on this battlefield. They spared no effort in fighting. Their blood stained their clothes, which were shrouded in celestial aura, and their beautiful faces. There were even terrifying spells that left glaring and ugly wounds on their bodies. But they did not show any fear or retreat. Instead, they became more and more courageous as they fought. The 7 celestial maidens were like peerlessly beautiful flowers blooming between heaven and earth, perfectly illustrating to all of the immortals what it meant to be a heroine. The celestial Tharch couldn't help but sigh with emotion upon seeing this. I wanted to have a son in the past, but now that I think about it, having so many daughters isn't so bad. Chapter 2078. Night had completely fallen. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and the river of stars shone brilliantly. The final battle in Dawn City had only just begun. The 40 million strong Kingdom of the 9 States United Army and the 80 million strong Heavenly Human Tribe United Army were both unleashing spell techniques with all their might. Everyone could be injured or even killed in this battle, and the 7 fairy maidens were no exception. The celestial Thearcha's heart ached at the sight of his injured daughters, but he wouldn't stop them from entering the battlefield as this was their own choice. At this time, there were only 2 types of cultivators in the Kingdom of the 9 States, warriors and cowards. There were cowards holed up in the Kingdom of the 9 States, waiting for other cultivators to join the battle. Of course, there were even more warriors who raised their weapons and fought back. Whoosh! A pure white heavenly sword suddenly descended from the sky, tearing through the earth for over 100 miles. Countless small mountains were cleaved in half, and over 10,000 living beings who were engaged in battle were swept up in it. Big sis! Damn it, the expressions of the other 6 celestial maidens changed. A red-robed fairy maiden's arm was severed by the heavenly sword, and her body was struck by the sword chi, causing her to vomit blood and tumble to the ground. The injured celestial maiden was none other than the leader of the 7 celestial maidens, Celestial Maiden Longevity. And the one who made a move was actually a Heaven Enlightenment Realm Marshal. Heaven Pioneer Stage Heavenly Human Tribe Mighty Figures were a nightmare for the vast majority of Return to Void Stage Mighty Figures. After all, it was no exaggeration that they were invincible below the Tao Integration Stage. Most of the Heaven Pioneer Stage Great Generals on the battlefield were being suppressed by Tao Integration Stage Super Mighty Figures, but there were bound to be some who slipped through. This Heaven Pioneer Stage Great General was no exception. Oh? You actually managed to block my sword and not die? A male marshal with fluttering black hair and a cold expression suddenly gave a sinister smile as he looked at the beautiful woman in red, whose robes had been sliced open by his sword chi. What a beautiful woman! I'm really looking forward to seeing her die. As he spoke, a hint of excitement flashed across his eyes. He took a step forward and quickly pounced toward Celestial Maiden Tian Shou. Ha ha! Fear, cry, beg for mercy under me. The male marshal smiled in a somewhat morbid manner. He was passionate about destroying all beautiful things, and he was even more passionate about destroying all beautiful things after they had lost their dignity. However, what disappointed him was that even though the woman in red in the distance was heavily injured and on the verge of death, her face did not show any signs of wanting to beg for mercy. Her extremely gorgeous face revealed a wisp of ruthlessness instead, as if she wanted to bite back before she died. Stop! Let go of my big sister! A blue-robed celestial maiden charged over from the side, wielding an icy blue immortal sword as she slashed it toward the male marshal. Wherever the blade of the sword passed, the surrounding void was frozen. Oh? Another little beauty? In the face of the celestial maiden's attack, the male great general was not enraged. Instead, he was elated, and a smile appeared on his face. His eyes roamed over the celestial maiden's body in an unscrupulous manner, and his pure white holy sword tore through the frozen space before unleashing another sword strike toward the celestial maiden. Rip! The white sword projection pierced through the frosty sword chi and struck the woman's chest. Puff! A ghastly sword wound appeared on the woman's snow-white skin. She spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying backwards. The male marshal licked his lips. Beautiful things are indeed very moving when they die. He made his way over to the blue-robed celestial maiden to finish her off. Don't you dare hurt my big sister and big sister 6. A crisp, enraged voice sounded from behind him. The male great general's smile became even more elated. Here they go again. One celestial maiden after another ran over. Was the Calabash brothers saving their grandpa? He was so blessed to see so many celestial maidens wailing in agony beneath his feet. The male great general turned around to look at the celestial maiden behind him with his holy sword in hand. He was then greeted by the sight of an immortal crane hurtling toward him. This was a tall and slender crane with pristine white feathers. Most importantly, it had a pair of mysterious bulging eyes that were even larger than its head. The male great general was a little dumbstruck upon seeing this. He had thought that he would encounter a celestial maiden after turning around, but he ended up encountering this weirdo? Just as he was rooted to the spot, the large-eyed immortal crane's wings had already torn through space before slashing toward the male great general's neck and waist. It was as fast as a return to Void stage sword immortal who had been practicing the way of the sword for many years. The large-eyed immortal crane was extremely fast, but the male great general was even faster. The male marshal drew a perfect arc with the pure white holy sword in his hand, and the sword projection arrived first, instantly slicing the ambushing large-eyed crane in half. Do you really think a mere return to Void stage, celestial immortal can harm me? The male heavenly god chuckled coldly. However, when the immortal crane was sliced in half and reduced to ink, its 2 watermelon-like eyeballs did not turn into ink. The eyes were black and white, and the whites of the eyes were bloodshot. They were extremely sinister as they stared at the male heavenly god. Then, they suddenly flew toward his face. Crap! The male heavenly god suddenly discovered that the immortal crane's eyeballs were its true body. Right at this moment, a piercing light erupted from the immortal crane's eyeballs. Boom! The 2 eyeballs exploded at the same time. The explosion was earth-shattering. Terrifying energy was imbued with twisted heaven-crushing true intent, engulfing everything in the surrounding area. A beautiful woman in a plain Taoist robe was slowly sent flying back by the shockwaves of the explosion. Her robes fluttered lightly as she stared intently at the explosion before her. Did it work? The woman was none other than Celestial Maiden Tianyu. The large-eyed crane immortal technique that she had comprehended could be said to be a top-tier assassination technique, and it was often able to achieve surprising results. Countless powerful enemies had died to this technique, but her opponent was a Heaven Pioneer stage great general, so she really wasn't sure how effective it would be. Whoosh! A white sword projection suddenly tore through the flames before hurtling toward Celestial Maiden Tianyu's head at an extremely fast speed. Tianyu's expression shifted, and she hurriedly evaded. However, the sword was simply too fast, and she managed to evade a lethal strike. However, the sword still punctured her shoulder, and blood splattered through the air. She let loose a pained cry and was just about to retreat. At this moment, a figure tore through the flames and pounced toward her. "How dare you injure me? How dare you injure me? I'm going to kill you!" The male great general's robes were in tatters, and his body was a mangled mess of blood and flesh. Many parts of his skin had been charred black, but his insane and terrifying aura clearly indicated that his current combat prowess was no joke. Imperial Seal Palm. Celestial Maiden Tianyu gritted her teeth as she unleashed a palm toward the male great general. A golden palm imbued with boundless power crashed toward the oncoming man. The male great general slashed out with his pure white holy sword, slicing the Imperial seal palm in half. Immediately afterward, he slashed Tianyu into the ground. What kind of sh*T2I Imperial seal palm is this? The male great general spat out a mouthful of blood as he looked at the fallen celestial maiden Tianyu. A cruel smile appeared on his face as he said, "How dare you blow me up? I'm going to slice open your soft, white body bit by bit and slice you 108 times in a row until you're reduced to pieces, then I'll grant you death." Before he had a chance to finish his sentence, a hand appeared out of nowhere and grabbed onto his head. Boom! The male great general's head was slammed viciously into the ground, and he felt as if his head were about to explode from the excruciating pain. He struggled, and he saw an extremely tall and broad figure standing before him. This figure exuded a peerless aura, as if it were threatening to crush the entire heavens. The man's hand was gripping onto his head, as if he were crushing an ant, and his life could be taken at any moment. Your the celestial Dharch. The male heavenly god's arrogance and madness had completely disappeared. Instead, his face was filled with boundless shock and horror. "I heard. You said my imperial seal palm is sh*T2I? The celestial Dharch chuckled as boundless golden light erupted from his palm. "Then I'll give you a taste of sh*T2Y. No. No!" The male great general yelled in shock and horror. Bam! The celestial Thearcha's palm crushed the great general's head. The celestial Dharch clapped his hands together and stood up as if he had done something insignificant. Celestial maiden Tianyu fell to the ground and stared blankly at the celestial Dharch. Her mouth gaped open as she spoke in a soft voice. "Father." Chapter 2079. The celestial Dharch looked at his daughter and gently helped her up with a smile. "Xiao Zi, you have to be careful next time. Stay away from areas with Heaven Pioneer stage great generals. Leave enemies of this level to the Tao integration stage." Celestial maiden Tianyu pursed her lips and nodded earnestly. At this time, the 5 figures had already surrounded the celestial Dharch. Their combined might was like the wrath of the heavens, causing all the living beings in the surroundings to tremble and lower their heads. "Celestial Dharch, you've finally made your move." The voice was indifferent, but it was imbued with boundless divine might. "We've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Seeing as you voluntarily entered the battlefield, it means that you're ready to fight us, right?" A father's love is like a mountain. A series of voices sounded from all directions, creating a sense that there was nowhere to run. Celestial maiden Tianyu's face paled at the sight of the 5 figures that had suddenly appeared. The 5 in front of him were the 5 heavenly gods of the enemy. They had finally made their move. "Father, I'm sorry. It's all my fault." Tears welled up in celestial maiden Tianyu's eyes, and her face was filled with remorse. She knew that these heavenly gods were targeting the celestial Dharch. If it weren't for saving her, why would the celestial Dharch personally enter this battlefield? And then be surrounded by 5 heavenly gods? "It's not your fault. I'll fight the heavenly gods one day. This is just an opportunity." The celestial Thearcha's expression didn't change much. Instead, he patted celestial maiden Tianyu's shoulder with a gentle smile. "Go, Xiaozi. Get away from here." "Father. Take care." Celestial maiden Tianyu pursed her lips and looked at the celestial Dharch with a meaningful gaze before flying into the distance. She knew that she would only be a burden even if she stayed here. The best way was to get away from the battlefield so that the celestial Dharch wouldn't have to worry about her. The heavenly gods ignored celestial maiden Tianyu. At their level, a return to void stage celestial immortal wouldn't be able to do anything. The celestial Dharch looked at Tianyu's departing figure with a complex expression. He had thought that he would be able to repress his emotions on this battlefield where people were constantly sacrificing themselves. He would be able to suppress the urge to save anyone who was in mortal danger. However, just as immortal Tianyu was about to be killed, He realized that he was wrong. He could not stand by and watch as a mortal Tianyu was sacrificed. He was still not qualified to be the Celestial Emperor. The Celestial Dharch let out an imperceptible sigh. Since things had come to this, they could only start a war. He looked at the 5 heavenly deities in front of him, and an extremely powerful aura erupted from his body. A white pillar of light soared into the sky, and endless power descended from the sky, perfectly fusing into his body. The expressions of the other heavenly gods changed. They discovered that the Celestial Emperor could borrow more power of heaven than they, who were born from the heavenly Tao. The Celestial Dharch was supposed to be the most important person in the mending of the heavens. However, after Nuwa took in Enlin and Little Hong Ling, he successfully became a substitute. However, this wasn't bad either. He could stay here and protect the human race and the 9 prefectures wholeheartedly. The Celestial Thearcha's mind was clear, and his cultivation level, which had already touched the threshold of the God of Creation stage, faintly loosened a little. A mighty force descended from the sky and fused into the man's body. He exuded a unique and powerful aura, and his imperial robe fluttered in the wind. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the 5 heavenly gods with a calm and indifferent expression. The Celestial Dharch was clearly looking up at the heavenly gods, but he seemed to be looking down on them. The kingdom of the 9 states coalition army was astonished upon seeing this. My God! The Celestial Dharch is facing 5 heavenly gods alone? So powerful! The Celestial Thearcha's aura seems to be even more powerful than the 5 heavenly gods combined. Is this the aura of a powerful being? The Celestial Dharch was clearly at a disadvantage, but everyone could see that not only was the Celestial Thearcha's figure becoming more and more imposing, but they also felt that he was about to win. The 5 heavenly gods also felt that something was amiss. Why was the Celestial Thearcha's aura so powerful? It felt like it wasn't the 5 of them surrounding the Celestial Dharch, but rather the Celestial Dharch surrounding all 5 of them. This wasn't right. Heavenly God Dong Long was the angriest. He was an extremely arrogant person, so how could he tolerate the Celestial Thearcha's extreme posturing? He immediately shouted angrily, Celestial Dharch, today is your doomsday. Feel despair. The Celestial Dharch looked at him with an indifferent expression, and a gentle and calm smile appeared on his face. His authoritative and reliable voice spread throughout the entire battlefield. 5 heavenly gods against me, and you still dare to be so confident? Do you really think there's no one left in the kingdom of the 9 states coalition army? His heroic words reverberated throughout heaven and earth. Fighting spirit was ignited in the hearts of all the mighty figures. Black Spirit Snake, White Spirit Snake, and Ao Xiaowu seemed to have understood something, and they hurried toward the battlefield where the Celestial Dharch was. Do you really think there's no one left in the kingdom of the 9 states coalition army? That's some kind of hint. The Celestial Dharch used a unique method to send a distress signal. It was not only very impressive, but it was also able to arouse the fighting spirit of his allies. The 3 exquisite beauties who rushed toward the Celestial Dharch were all in awe of him. Hee, a few more flies. Heavenly God Dong Long gripped the spike on his waist tightly with both hands as he chuckled coldly. Leave it to me. The chubby boy who was stuffing food into his mouth spoke in a muffled voice. His body flashed, and he flew toward Ao Xiaowu and the others, clearly planning to block all 3 attackers by himself. The Celestial Dharch instantly felt the pressure on him increase upon seeing this. He had thought that he would be able to hold on for a while if he fought 3 alone, but now he had to fight 4 alone? I'll be the vanguard. Heavenly God Dong Long chuckled coldly as a divine halo appeared above his head. Divine halos also appeared on his arms. He had already used 3 divine halos before the battle had even begun. The heavenly god that was a statue of a divine spirit spoke telepathically. Then I'll be responsible for adapting to the situation. You guys go. In his eyes, this celestial Dharch was not worthy of 4 heavenly gods attacking at the same time. The celestial Dharch was almost moved to tears upon hearing this. This was divine assistance. Eternal heavenly God, since you've decided to attack, you have to give it your all. Don't slack off. Let's attack together. A delicate and pretty young girl with a golden turtle shell on her back stretched out her body as she spoke with an extremely serious expression. Heavenly God Black Mist, who had been a coward just a while ago, was now very proactive. All right, the statue replied indifferently. It clearly didn't care. It was only participating in the battle to end the battle earlier. The celestial Dharch didn't know what to say upon seeing this. His emotions were on a roller coaster ride, but his expression remained calm and collected. The battle had begun, and it was already 4 against 1. The celestial Dharch was extremely flustered. Right at this moment, a blood-curdling cry suddenly erupted in the distance. That was the heavenly god Karma's anguished cry. All the heavenly gods' hearts jolted, and they all turned toward the source of the cry. Then, they discovered to their astonishment that the heavenly god Karma was being beaten up by 3 women one after another. Chapter 2080. Black Spirit Snake slashed her realm creation evil vanquishing sword viciously toward the heavenly Karma god, and a golden sword projection erupted into the sky, knocking the little fatty back several dozen kilometers. Before the little fatty had a chance to catch his breath, White Spirit Snake had already appeared behind him with her yin and yang dual swords in hand. The black and white dual swords intertwined to form an extremely sharp blade, which tore through the heavenly Karma god's heavenly god defenses and left a crimson gash on his body. Ah! Die! The little fatty let loose a wail of anguish before his eyes suddenly turned red, and he thrust his palms toward Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake. Karma! Boom! A burst of invisible yet extremely terrifying mighty power descended from heaven and earth before striking Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake's bodies in a stealthy yet ferocious manner. The power of Karma, especially the power of Karma that was triggered by the heavenly Tao, was extremely elusive, and normal Tao integration stage super mighty figures wouldn't even be able to detect its existence. However, Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake slashed their swords through the air at the same time, and a burst of power suddenly descended from the heavenly Tao before injecting itself into the blades of their swords, severing the invisible Karma. The heavenly Karma god was dumbstruck. How could this be? You can also borrow the power of the heavenly Tao? The little fatty was still in a state of shock when the red-robed Ao Xiaowu appeared beside him. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her aura was indiscernible, as if she were in a deep slumber. However, her little fist had already descended lightly. The heavenly Karma god felt like there was nowhere to hide in that instant. Bam! The fist twisted the little fatty's round face, and his body was sent flying like a round ball. Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake took advantage of this opportunity to unleash a torrential downpour of sword strikes, tearing at the little fatty's body. The pitiful heavenly Karma god didn't even get a chance to retaliate as his blood-curdling cries erupted throughout heaven and earth. These 3 women were far more powerful than the heavenly Karma god had imagined, and the heavenly Karma god was completely powerless against them. Save me! Save me! The heavenly Karma god yelled at his heavenly god teammate. The other 4 heavenly deities were all speechless. They had accumulated their imposing aura with great difficulty, planning to give the enemy a fatal blow, but in the end their own allies were the first to ask for help? To think that the fatty had confidently said that he would take care of the 3 women, but in less than 2 minutes, he was already screaming with a bloody nose and swollen face. The face of Cammy had been completely lost by this fellow. The girl with the golden tortoise shell on her back poked her head out of the shell to look at the women and said with a shocked expression, "These 3 women are so fierce." The heavenly space god's expression was the most grave. All 3 of them are quite extraordinary. To think that they can all borrow the power of the heavens to battle. The first two had used the power bestowed upon them by the heavenly Tao after they had mended the sky. As for the last dragon tribe female, she borrowed the power of the heavenly Tao by merging her body with heaven and earth. Their battle style is completely different from the powerful beings of the heaven-crushing sect, but their power is still extremely terrifying. "I'll go help the heavenly karma god," the eternal heavenly god said indifferently. The heavenly space god nodded. The eternal heavenly god began to fly toward Ao Xiaowu. Ao Xiaowu was sleeping while pummeling the little fatty. All of a sudden, heaven and earth fell deathly silent. Regardless of whether it was the air or vital energy, energy or matter, everything became motionless, as if it had been frozen into an eternal image. The divine spirit statue flew toward Ao Xiaowu from behind. It was still completely motionless, as if it had been struck by a rock. However, a gray spear had appeared in the statue's hand, and the tip of the spear was aimed directly at Ao Xiaowu's head. Ao Xiaowu's movements were frozen to the spot. Even her black hair, which danced in the air, had become as still as a painting, as if it had been frozen in time. It would never decay, it would never change, and it would forever maintain a single state. Eternity represented the stillness of heaven and earth. Only the eternal heavenly God had the right to change this state of eternity. In other words, the eternal heavenly God was the ruler of this realm. The spear flew through the air, and the eternal heavenly God felt as if he could already envision the scene of Ao Xiaowu's head exploding into a bloody flower. However, in that instant, it was as if he were in a dream. The woman in red, whose back was facing it, had already turned around at some point. Her head shifted in a flash, dodging the spearhead stab. Her eyes were still closed, and she was still in a deep slumber. The only difference was that the eternal heavenly God was astonished to discover that it felt as if it had been forcibly dragged into a dream. Even though it had only been an instant, many things had already changed. For example, not only had the woman in red struggled free from its eternal shackles, she had also evaded its attack, and her fist had already crashed viciously into its face. The power of heaven and earth combined with the power to destroy all things came crashing down. Not only was Ao Xiaowu able to conform to the heavenly Tao, but she had also learned the heaven-crushing true intent and had even been invited by the ancient dragon empress to become the heavenly disciple's attendant. Even though she had turned down the offer without any hesitation, it was quite clear that her heaven-crushing true intent was definitely not bad. Bam! An earth-shattering explosion erupted. Ao Xiaowu's agonized wail immediately followed. Ow! Ow ow ow! Ao Xiaowu's fist crashed into the statue's face, only to be struck by the stone statue's solid surface. Her fist became bright red, and she almost woke up from her slumber from the pain. Hee, do you really think you can defeat me just because you've broken through my eternal domain? Don't forget that I am the eternal heavenly God. My body is eternal and indestructible. You won't be able to harm even a single hair on my head. The eternal heavenly God's mighty voice reverberated through heaven and earth as he stabbed his spear toward Ao Xiaowu. Ao Xiaowu had entered a deep slumber hack mode, and her body was as fast as a ghost as she perfectly evaded all of the eternal heavenly God's attack. She seemed to possess the ability to predict her opponent's movements, and she was able to evade each and every one of the eternal heavenly God's attacks. The eternal heavenly God became more and more astonished as he fought. How was it that she was able to see through all of his attacks? It was understandable if it was any other living being, but this was the eternal heavenly God. The will of the heavens was unfathomable, so how was Ao Xiaowu able to predict his attacks time and time again? The eternal heavenly God suddenly came to a realization as he looked at the snoring Ao Xiaowu. The will of the heavens was indeed unfathomable, but what if it was the heavens? Ao Xiaowu had only sent a message to the heavens to kill the eternal heavenly God before leaving everything to the heavens, which meant that the heavens were using Ao Xiaowu's body to battle the eternal heavenly God. The eternal heavenly God understood. No wonder Ao Xiaowu was able to see through his attacks time and time again. She was fighting herself,